my strength and nutrition coach here, Eli, back on the podcast. I think the last time that we had him on here, he had not gone through his shoulder replacements. But again, he's been someone that's, helped me out a ton, helped out a ton of my students, helped out a lot of you guys, even some of you guys that are in the chat right now with your lifting and your dieting and everything else. And so we'll get into all that stuff. If you guys have questions, save them, or if you have to leave or something, drop it in. But we have Eugene, obviously, he's a doctor of physical therapy, black belt. We have Eli, who, diet, strength training, whatever you want to talk to in regards to that. And then, me for, whatever the hell I do. So if you guys want to throw any questions out, you can throw them into the chat and we'll get around to them a little bit later on. But yeah, I think the last time we had you in your, maybe you had, because we had you in your, like, what, in 2023? In March of 2023.
Okay, so I had the first one in April of 23.
Okay.
So
April.
it was just prior to.
Just prior, okay. God, you had him in 23.
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
so I had both of them within 5 months. So I had the right one done. It was causing me the most pain, and they did it in April. And they did the total shoulder replacement. They did a stemless humeral implant.
I was going to say, because it's not like, because you had a shoulder replacement, and I know the replacement, the landscape there's changing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Where back in the day you get a replacement of a joint, and you basically you're just doing a lot of nothing. Whereas now, even knee replacements and shoulder replacements, there's a lot of stuff. So what kind of shoulder replacement did you have again?
Yeah. So, and to that point, and Eugene, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when I went to UK in 2017, they wanted to do like the traditional one.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say they were saying that I would be limited to like 25 pounds or so. I'll be very limited.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. But anyway, I had dealt with the osteoarthritis my entire life. And the humerus, the head of the humerus had grown so much, it was actually wearing, the glenoid somewhat.
Yeah.
And then it had grown so much, it was actually pushing out of the fossa. But anyway, wonderful doctor in Cincinnati, Dr. Brian Grawey, was able to help me. And he did a ream and run process where they actually don't do any sort of inlay or onlay in the glenoid. They actually just ream it out and resurface the glenoid. And then they do a stemless implant in the humerus. Before they would put this big rod in there. And
so for someone that's like, half stupid like me about this stuff, what does all that mean? So like with your shoulder, like, like what's the difference between, say, a traditional shoulder replacement versus this one?
Yeah. So the shoulder, a lot of times people will say ball and socket, and it's really not like a ball sitting in a socket. It's very shallow. I mean, all that musculature, if it wasn't there, it would just fall out. It's very shallow. Okay. Think of like a bowling ball sitting in a saucer.
Okay.
It's like, and again, Eugene is an expert in this field.
Just to share something, the shoulder is the most dislocated joint in the body. Yeah, so it tells you it's got a ton of movement. It's like,
well, I mean, that makes sense, because when you look at a skeleton, right? Like the skeleton, the ball of the shoulder there, it sits there, but it's not like anything. It's not like it's locked into the hip like the pelvis or something. It's just sort of sitting there.
Yeah, and then you got so much more mobility that leads less stability. You have to have more control. You have so many different ways to move. So,
but the bone in your upper arm is the humerus, and the end of it kind of comes up, and then the end of it's got a ball on it, and that sits in that saucer. That saucer is known as the glenoid fossa, and it has all kinds of movement. All right. Well, the head of the humerus is it's spherical.
Okay.
Well, mine had grown so it was almost like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And it wouldn't move. Like I remember I had won Mr. Boston at a WBFF show, and I couldn't even fix, we had to wear suits for the awards, and I couldn't fix my collar.
Wow.
The expediters had to help because my arms wouldn't go up to actually fix it. That's why I never did classic or anything.
Well, I remember that. I remember like when we would, do jiu-jitsu, and at that time it was like everything was, we have to figure out how to make sure that you don't get your shoulder cranked out of socket. And it was this constant adjustment, because I mean, it was even getting your gi on. It was like this whole thing,
I struggled putting a coat on and off. So the gi was the same. Yeah. But big thank you to you for, you gave me ways to train that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Like, your coaching was very beneficial to me and continues to be. But with that particular surgery that I had, it preserves more than 90% of the bone that you would lose from a traditional one, because they're not actually planing down that saucer to put any sort of onlay or inlay in that. And then they're not hollowing out the humerus to put a peg down in there.
Okay.
So they just resurface the glenoid, and then they put a ball on the end of the humerus, and then now you've got a metal ball sitting in that joint. And I've got a big gnarly scar on each side that's about 6 inches long. And I've got more range of motion now than I've had in 15 years.
Well, I mean, then we were talking about that, like coming back to training was weird because now all of a sudden you have access to muscles that are being used in a way that you haven't used them for in over a decade, like doing a pull-up.
Yeah. I hadn't done pull-ups in ever because I couldn't.
Right. And so you have like the lat strength to do it, but then you have all these like little muscles that are being worked in weird ways that they haven't been worked in a decade.
Yeah. So it was crazy, but like people would see, I think they didn't understand the limitations I had because I was so strong in the ranges that I did have. It's like a bench press because I could get my arms in front of me.
Yeah.
And raw benching, I could bench over 500 pounds, and I had done so in competition, but I could move this way. Okay. But I couldn't get my arms up, and I had absolutely no external rotation. So if someone got mount and they pinned my arm to the floor, it's like it would just explode.
Well, even that right there, like
I couldn't do that.
You couldn't do that.
Not at all. No,
you couldn't even lift it back then.
I'm getting closer to where like I could never do classic or bodybuilding because of that, because I couldn't do the front and back double biceps. I'm getting very close to being able to do so.
Do you think you would do one of those?
Possibly. I mean, I'll be 40 in August, so then I would be able to move up an age group. So
now classic is where maybe are they because like bodybuilding now is just about like, it looks like, I mean, to me, what it looks like from the outside is just size.
When you went on a pro level.
On a pro level,
you have two classes. You have the 212 and then you have the open. And the classic is broken. It has weight limits per height.
Okay.
So like say, for instance, like me at 5'10", I think my weight limit in the NPC would be like 207.
207. Okay.
207 or something like that. So it's what it is just so you don't have like, like say in the open a few years ago, you had a guy named Rolly Winkler, and Rolly was like, 5'5", 5'6", and like 280.
Wow.
And that's far outside from that classic.
Yeah, because you don't have like the taper and everything else. Because you look
Sure.
at those like the classic bodybuilders, they had a certain look to them, and it was very aesthetically pleasing. Like in a lot of it was before you start getting into like the GH bellies and stuff like that, where I guess it's GH belly, right?
There's a few different schools of thought on that.
Okay.
But yeah, the intestines have more growth hormone receptors than any other organs.
Okay.
So they get swollen essentially. Is that what happens, or bloating?
Well, and like I said,
there's a few schools of thought on.
Okay, because I didn't know like because I'd seen it called GH belly.
Yeah, a lot of people call it Palumboism. And I should know his name, but his name escapes me. But he was one of the first guys you've seen with it, Dave Palumbo.
Yeah.
But that distension in the abdomen. Some people will argue that it's from not keeping your core tight in the off season and just continuing to push food and actually stretching that abdominal wall from just the internal volume.
Okay.
Some people will say that it's from excessive use of insulin and growth.
Okay.
So again, there's a few different arguments there.
I mean, because you still had guys like back in the 80s, like a Lee Haney or something, who could still like do a vacuum pose.
Could hit a vacuum pose and had that tapered waist. And Lee Haney had one of the best physiques ever.
Yeah, and he was a massive dude.
He was a big dude. Yeah, big guy. Like I don't think people realize. Like I mean, everybody thinks like of Ronnie, because he was
Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah, 300 pounds on stage and like
massive,
hardly any body fat. But like if you meet a guy in person and he's 200 pounds and very low body fat, that's a big guy.
That's a big dude.
That's a lot of muscle. You know. Like the last show that I did, I had to do men's physique, and this was prior to them pushing more size, and they marked me down. I was 212, and we pinched at 3%.
Okay.
And I mean that's a lot of muscle on a 5'10" frame. So
I remember going to like the Arnold Classic for a jiu-jitsu competition in 2004, and just afterwards walking around the booths and stuff, and they had a bunch of the bodybuilders that were there, that were really big at the time. And I remember walking around, and I didn't realize how short most of them were, because some of them are tall, like decent, like 5'10", whatever. But a lot of them, like I remember seeing Dexter Jackson,
like 5'6", 5'7".
Yeah, he's like, I mean, like not a super short guy. He's not like super short, but he's not tall. But like most of them are relatively short.
Yeah. When you see a guy like he just won the Olympia. I'm just drawing a blank today for some reason.
Yeah, the mustache,
but
is that the guy?
No, you're thinking of the classic.
Because you're thinking of Bumstead.
Yeah, Bumstead. Yeah.
Samson's his name. Something. But and again, I know all you bodybuilder enthusiasts out there are probably like pulling your hair out. But anyway, Samson Dowda. But he like he's only like maybe 5'10", 5'11", but he towers over a lot of the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you get a guy that's 6 foot and 270 on stage, he looks like a giant. Brian Shaw awarded the winner of the 212.
Oh yeah.
Did you see that? Looked
No.
like he was separating 2 kids. Like he's like 6'8", and he
Brian
holds them up
Shaw's
by the
huge.
hands. It looks like he separated 2 kids
That's
from fighting.
funny.
He's like, and he's holding their hands like this, and they're like at full extension, and he's
Now-
a giant.
Now, how did you come back? So how do you come back from shoulder replacements? Because, you know, injuries are tough. You know, I think one of the biggest problems for most people is when they come back from injuries, they botch the recovery, which leads to a lot of issues, you know, later on, because they try to go too hard, too fast.
Yeah.
I see this a lot, like in jiu-jitsu, you see this all the time where people have this sort of mistaken idea. I got to make up for lost time.
Yep.
And I did it when I was younger, you know, make up for lost time,
Yeah.
right? And you go into it and then you get re-injured or you hurt yourself somewhere else because you get back too fast. What was the recovery like, and, you know, what kind of things did you focus on to do it intentionally and correctly?
So, you know, good and bad. I've dealt with joint issues my entire life, and I didn't realize it until 2021, but it was kind of hereditary. I met my father for the first time in 2021 and found out that he had, you know, bad shoulders and arthritis and all that stuff too. So anything that I'd done in the past was with that in the background. Like whether, you know, any grappling, powerlifting, bodybuilding, anything there was joint issues.
Yeah.
You know, and always had to deal with that. So it was always something. So you begin to understand that, and it's like I talk about having aggressive patience. Like, what I mean by that is, like, when I'm talking to my guys, my clients and stuff, like being aggressively patient. It's like doing everything you can, but knowing it's like, okay, this is going to take time. Nobody gets hurt when they feel bad. It's when you start to feel good that you want to push and push and push, and having the maturity, both as a human being, but also as an athlete, to know that, you know, I can't rush this. And I think bodybuilding has given me a lot more patience, because you do things today that you're not going to see for months.
Sure.
You know, it takes a long time to build tissue.
Yeah.
And even, you know, and you can compare that to jiu-jitsu. Like, progress is incremental at best. It's like trying to build a mountain one layer of paint at a time, you know?
But I think, like, you know, jiu-jitsu, the benefit of jiu-jitsu is that it's literally a game that we get to play. So
Sure.
even if you know that you're drilling or you're doing something for it, and maybe you don't get the direct, ooh, it worked, you still had like this clear attempt of trying to make this movement work, like, or a technique or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But lifting, I think it's one of the more important lessons that I think lifting kind of gives you, is that you have to sort of sometimes change. Like, we had Pete Roberts, the guy that, you know, founded Origin, and he kind of said this, and I just like the term, but change where you get your dopamine from. You know, so like, you're playing in a game like jiu-jitsu, you get dopamine because you're in this engagement with someone else. But when you're lifting, like you said, you're getting ready to lift, you know, you won't see the results for a while, right? If you're dieting, right, you're eating really well, and you may not see the like real results to yourself. You may not really notice it until weeks later.
Yeah.
And so you have to sort of change the way you get your dopamine from, I noticed the change, or I was successful at something, versus I did what I was supposed to do, and that's it, right? Like, just putting your work in, and then letting it happen, because I think that's the way a lot of times with, like, the way I see it.
Sure.
Lifting, diet, whatever, it just, you do your work, and then you that's the part that you have to be excited that you did.
Yeah. And but also learning to, so like you said, you know, you need to do the technique in jiu-jitsu and getting the feedback from that. Instead of just thinking, I have to complete this lift and I'm going to get this done, and then I'm going to go home and rest. Looking for that kinesthetic feedback in the lift. Like, so that's where I'm at mentally. Like, when I'm lifting, say I'm doing something, I'm doing an exercise, the whole time I'm thinking, do I feel this where I want to feel it? Like, I'm connecting with that muscle, you know, and everybody talks about the mind muscle connection, all that junk, but like, I'm literally thinking, do I feel this where I want to feel this? And I'm honing my technique even with that. So like, when I'm lifting, like, it's not just a matter of just simply moving weight.
Right.
It's, I want to move it with the technique that is going to activate that muscle as much as possible. And that's why I was able to build a world-class in the WBFF physique, and then a national level physique in the NPC, was understanding the mechanics of that and being able to pinpoint stuff, even with lessened range of motion. But observing that feedback and, you know, every rep, making every rep intentional, being very intentional with my training instead of just going through the motions.
Yeah. And I think that's something you can do in jiu-jitsu, something you can do in lifting, right? You can go through the motions and just, like I said, with lifting, it can be just, I'm just going to get this lift done, get it out of the way, clang, 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 clang. All right, I'm done with the set. Or you can, like you said, focus on it. Same thing in jiu-jitsu. You know, I've seen people where, you know, you'll see them do a drilling session and you can see people slop through stuff.
I was thinking about shrimping, just watching people shrimp. It's like,
you know, I mean, in shrimping, it's like, it's, you know, shrimping in the beginning, it sometimes it'll look ugly, but, you know, especially for me, like when you start to see some of the guys that become a little bit more advanced, like, let's say if you're doing a particular session where you're like, all right, we're going to like do some takedowns. We're going to be in, basically, you know, you're giving each other a look and you're going through, you'll see people that are just kind of going through the motions and they're just trying to get this over with because we're going to get ready to roll in a little bit, versus the people that are trying to feel the things out and really tune into the sensation of getting this movement, everything else. And you tend to find the people that really focus on what they're doing 100% tend to have better results later on.
And that's what I tell a lot of my guys is like, be intentional. Everything you do, be intentional. You know, and that carries over to anything that you're passionate about or anything that you want to improve on, you know. But just with training, with lifting, be intentional. Nothing is just simply there to be there. Like, it's all there for a reason. So be very intentional.
Yeah, that's you know, when I went down to your gym and we were just going through a lift, we're working the back, and like there was some, I don't know if I was doing like some type of row, and like we switched it up and it just felt totally different after a certain cueing and just like really being almost like trying to visualize the muscle working. It was weird. And I've done that before for a lot of different things, but I'm trying to, if I'm rehabbing somebody, I'm trying to get them to like focus on a certain muscle group or a certain area working, but like it definitely feels different. And it's almost like you get a better contraction, I think, in some way.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, like, for instance, like with the back training is very difficult for a lot of people because everybody likes to train mirror muscles because you can see them, and it's easy to kind of get your mind in them because you can see them working. I can see my biceps when I'm curling. I can see my chest when I'm doing flies. I can't really see my back unless I have a series of mirrors set up for that. So learning how to connect there and really focus on that and find that, you know, that kinesthetic awareness kind of, you know, for lack of a better term. And when you think about that, like, and you and I know, like, you think of the muscle and it has an origin and an insertion, and the fibers run directly from A to B there, you know, they run in that direction. So you flex that muscle by bringing the insertion near the origin, bringing the end of it closer to the beginning. Well, if I'm trying to do a row to emphasize my lats and I elevate my scapula, well, I'm lengthening that muscle. So it's not shortening. So that means something else is pulling that weight. So little cues that you give people, you know, sitting your shoulders down, put your shoulder blades in your back pockets, you know, in those things to help them find those muscle groups. It's similar to how you guys will, you know, give people cues with jiu-jitsu, you know.
Yeah, well, another for me, like when I've got like a 2-hour long, I'm still like, like it's sitting on it's sitting in my editor, in my file to, you know, basically trim it up so I can send it to my editor. But we've got like 2 hours of me and Eli lifting, doing a sort of a chest day. And I remember when we were on the shoulders, I'd never really done them properly, and I didn't realize it. But that's side lateral raises, like where you're here. You know, because when I would do them, typically, you know, I would get my shoulders would definitely fill it, but then my traps, my traps would be all like filled up. And so then like afterwards you made the adjustments and was like, okay, like straighten those arms out and really not even focus on getting up very high, but just towards where you feel this and then back down. Because if we start going up, eventually then it starts to
you'll get an impingement, and then you have to elevate the scapula. Like with lateral raises, they're very interesting because even with bench press, like we're trying to move an immense amount of weight with finesse muscles. Like, you know, you look at the body and the way it's built, like a lot of these things are just meant to hold something in place so you can use bigger muscles. If I'm trying to push something, like if we're trying to, you know, your car runs out of gas, we're trying to push it off the road. We're not going to just stand straight and press. We're going to brace with our upper body and drive with our hips. You know, so whenever we're trying to move this, we're moving a lot of weight with finesse muscles. And when you think of a lateral raise, I would never hand you something heavy this way. Like I'm going to hold it close and hand it. So again, that is very much a finesse muscle or movement even. So when I'm doing that, it's really easy for other muscles to want to help.
Sure.
A lot of people, one of the easiest things there is people just go too heavy. So then their traps come up to initiate the movement. Yep. So then they're doing almost like an upright row or even a shrug.
Yeah.
So a cue there is like just long arms, punch the floor, long neck, and then try to drag your fingers up the walls and get that reach with that. And then having at least a neutral shoulder position or even slightly an internal rotation to keep focus on that lateral delt. But yeah, little things like that, just because otherwise especially when we're looking at targeting muscle groups, that means turning the other ones off. And especially if someone's imbalanced, it's like, especially if you're used to being in this posture anyway, from boxing.
Your body wants to do that.
You're used to being in this position from grappling and boxing and everything else. It's like you already want to elevate your traps or elevate your scapula to flex your traps. So trying to take those out and allow you to work those other muscle groups, you have to be conscious of that.
Is there, I'm just curious, is there like a lift or a exercise that you see people do incorrectly the most often?
That's one of them.
The lateral raises?
Yeah, that's one of them because again, everybody wants to go really heavy. A lot of times, I mean, you can look and see, you walk in any gym, you're going to see things if you understand it, be like you guys watching novices roll and stuff. You could pick apart a million things, but like, that, or even like, I don't think people understand the concept of joint stacking. Like, so I had no external rotation in my shoulders. Now I was actually stuck in kind of somewhat internal rotation. I couldn't get to neutral. But I never really had any elbow issues. The reason being is I understood the concept of joint stacking. So when we're doing curls or we're doing, triceps or skull crushers or something, you'll see guys, they'll go really, really heavy and they'll throw their elbows out and curl. Well, when I throw that elbow out, free weights, the line of resistance is always vertical. I mean, gravity pulls things straight down. So when I throw that elbow out, now there's force running laterally through my elbow. So it's the same concept as like tennis elbow. It's stress this way instead of in line with the bicep. So a lot of times you'll see guys curl too heavy and they'll end up getting tennis elbow and they can't understand. Or they'll do, like skull crushers and their elbows won't be in line with their shoulders and their hands will come out here. Again, you got stress laterally in the elbow. And
probably save a lot of shoulders, a lot of elbow problems that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it just simply comes from, when I say joint stacking, it's, wrist in line with the elbow, in line with the shoulder. And that's what's going to give me activation for those muscles. And then of course you have a lot of times when you see, one is just simply people not knowing, not thinking about the form of the movement or the technique of it, or even the concept of feeling the muscles working. And then another would be going too heavy so that you have to use way more muscle to move it than you should. Back to the lateral raises.
So finishing up on the shoulder replacements, because then we'll start bouncing around. We'll talk about some cutting and bulking stuff in here in a second. How long did it take you? Because maybe someone's listening to this and they're like having some bad shoulders, or maybe someday they're going to have them and they're going to need replacement. How long did it take you to get back to where you were able to, be what you would consider close to 100%?
I'm still working on that.
Right. Okay.
Yep. So I still want to say that 100% in all manners.
Sure.
Still have some pain to work through and if we train, like say, the other day when I rolled several rounds, like my right shoulder was pretty tight for some time after. But I mean, the pros greatly outweigh the cons there. That's just simply, it is what it is. and I'll work through that and that'll improve. But, the first one was done in April and I was in a position where I could care for myself with that arm by the time I had the second done.
Okay.
So I could, wash my face and drive my car and everything. And this one was in a sling and I could drive, and I could take care of myself with that. Now, so I was in a very unique position. So I think maybe I'm the exception to the rule rather than the norm, because I had a great understanding of how to come back from that a lot better than, the average patient. I had a lot of people around me, Eugene, a lot of people that were a great help to me. And then too, my diet was on point. So I never allowed myself to get too far out of shape. I was able to use peptides for healing. a lot of things that really expedited that process.
The peptides like BPC 157, TB 500, stuff like
Yes,
that.
sir. Exactly right. Exactly right. And those helped a great deal with that healing. But also doing what I could, working around that. So like when the right side was down, I would still work the left side. I would make sure that it was in a position that it wasn't compromised. I would utilize a belt squat to work legs.
Yeah.
I would do machines for legs.
I remember seeing you, like, you'd have your arm there strapped and you'd be like just doing what you could, little squats or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you won't, things won't always be ideal, but you'll do the best you can till you can do better.
Sure.
In any case. So, but, I would say about a year after each of them, I was feeling pretty good. Well, for instance, I'd made a comment to one of the guys at the gym. I said, I had my surgeries in 23. I said, but before December of 24, I'll bench 405. Now, I hadn't been benching much, but it was something I was always fairly decent at it. And I'd bench like maybe 7 times. And I benched 405 in December, just because it was, I don't know, just more of a mental thing than anything. It's like, okay, I'm not broke. I can do this. Yeah. But at this point now, I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
I can do shoulder press. I've not done that in 10, 12 years. I can do pull-ups. I've not done that in over a decade. I can fix the collar on my shirt. I can tuck my pants in. I can do I can get something off the top shelf.
The stuff we don't think about.
I can give you a high five. I can.
Hey man.
Yeah. It was like even getting something out of the back seat because I had no external rotation. Like if I tried to hand you something in the back seat, like it would be like I would be like here like this while I'm driving.
Okay.
I couldn't, so it really it changed my life completely, and kind of gave me a lot more options. And even if I hadn't been able to get back to the kind of shape, and like right now I'm in pretty decent shape, but it's still just my quality of life has improved a great deal too.
You mentioned something during that I think is really important for people, even like with the jiu-jitsu, right? So like regardless of whatever you're doing, keeping your diet in check when you're not training or when you're not able to train at the capacity that you'd like to.
Yes, sir.
And then doing what you can. Because what happens with a lot of people I see with like issues when they get injuries is when they get injured, they get into that sort of depression. And they stop getting that feedback from, because there's a certain amount of feedback that you get when you try to work out or train. And if you're eating like crap, you feel not so good. You don't feel great. Whereas, then if you're not training at all, that feedback's gone. And you're not getting that reminder of, hey, bro, stop eating like an asshole. This isn't good for you. Right. And so you see people go off the rails because they don't have the feedback and they're depressed. And then, and then when they try to come back to it after a while, they've gained 20, 30 pounds. And now you're working uphill.
Yeah.
And then just figuring out and asking yourself that question of do what you can. I mean, that's a simple one, but a lot of people, again, it's one of those things where we all sort of it's easy to get down on yourself.
It is,
and you have to sort of reframe it from like, that's a superpower as humans that we all have. We can reframe the situation. We can change our perspective on how we choose to look at it. Because you can be like, oh man, I was born with this arthritis. And, you could go down that rabbit hole, or you can be like, well, what can I do about it? What can I do?
Yeah. It's and focusing on that is huge. I feel like mindset is everything. Like, especially in my career as an athlete and, just life in general, I feel like, how you look at something, because your body's only going to do what your mind tells it to. And when you start like worrying about something, and it's like you're rehearsing it in your mind to play out that way, and you start to slowly buy into it, and, doing what you can until you can do more. Like I have people look at my pictures, like, and I will post, I've got one where I was like at my lowest weight.
Oh yeah.
So I went from like 242 or so at like 6% body fat. It was pretty good size, and down to like 202.
Yeah. You were right around 200. There was one point where like I weighed more than you.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's weird.
Yeah. And people were like, but you still have abs. I'm like, yeah. Cause I still did what I could, and I adjusted my diet for that. It's like, okay, well, I'm not doing as much, so I don't need as much fuel. And, that's very simple to say, but, the self-restraint and the mental discipline to do that is, different. It's
well, I think it's like people like learning, like, because you understand this really well, like understanding how to eat and understanding like like you just said, food is fuel.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that's a big thing that most people don't really think about. You know, it's like this is just energy going into you.
Yes.
You know, because humans, I mean, we're basically tubes that basically, I mean, if you think about it from fucking mouth to the back end, right? We're these tubes that basically digest food for energy. And then the other side of us, basically it's like eat, consume energy. Then we have a couple things that help us reproduce. That's what we're meant to do. And then everything else is like extra. I mean, we're meant to, you know, eat, sleep, poop, and, you know, something else. And then and everything else is just extra, you know. But I think that's an important distinction. And you know, that kind of segues into the bulking and cutting side of it. You know, because I the first time I cut weight with you was like that was an eye-opening experience for some of you guys that are here. Listen, I know like William that was in here, he'd worked with you, and a lot of the guys that I know that have worked with you had the same exact thing, which is, Jesus Christ, I'm eating so much food, I'm losing weight, you know, or whatever. And again, it's because you understand the purpose of the food, what it's there for, like why I should be eating fats at this amount, why you should be eating this many carbs and so forth.
Yeah. And you know, to touch further on what you said earlier, like beginning to see food as fuel, especially in the culture that we've all grown up in. You know, food is so many things. It's comfort. It's a social thing. If you haven't seen somebody and ever you say, we should go get something to eat, you know, or you have a bad day, mom makes you your favorite meal, or you do good at the game, so dad takes you out for pizza, you know, and it's seen as a reward and so on. And then you get almost numb to that, to where you're eating that all the time. And there's no longer that, you know, you just get used to eating these things. And I've seen people even say, like, when are you going to eat normal? To like someone, it's like, well, what's your normal?
Right.
Is it fast food? Is it, because I mean, to me, these one ingredient foods are pretty normal. Like if I took you out for a steak and potato at a dinner, that would be a nice dinner.
Well, this was how humans ate for thousands and thousands of years, right? They ate, you know, fruits, vegetables, meats, things like that. Yeah. These things that came in a box for you. That's a relatively new experience.
Yep. And that's what, and that's a good point too, is I tell people, you know, if you don't follow any sort of plan, if you don't follow, you know, anything laid out by a coach, simply do the bulk of your shopping around the perimeter of the grocery store, because that's where the food is. Everything down the aisles, you know, if you pick up a box and there's 20 things in it and you can only pronounce like one of them, then that's not real food, you know. And one of the things that helped me get a good grasp on that was early on was learning how to combat inflammation. And I realized at a point, it's like, man, you know, like if I eat this, I don't feel as good. If I eat this, you know, it really exaggerates my arthritic issues. And taking an anti-inflammatory approach to diet has really been a game changer for me early on. And then getting that understanding and then becoming educated in that field, you know, taking that same approach, especially, you know, when you're dealing with athletes, you know, we want to keep inflammation at bay. And, you know, you're training jiu-jitsu guys, and it's like, okay, well, you're practicing a game that compromises your joints. The last thing we want is to have those joints not be able to feel good, you know, and be tight and not recover. And, you know, inflammation is not going to help any of that.
It's going to limit your range of motion too.
Yes, sir.
So one of the most frustrating things for me as in my 20s and 30s, I would consistently lift, you know, decently, nothing super crazy, but I would lift. I never ever put any stock, anything into my diet. Like my diet was just like whatever the hell I wanted to eat. And it was probably like just realizing how much more I could have got out of my time. I feel like I wasted so much of my time in the gym because I didn't supplement with the proper, with the proper diet. And I just can't, like, you know, people that like, oh, I lift weights, but then, you know, they don't see a lot of changes. Well, you need to have the building blocks for putting on that muscle, or feel better, or to have more energy,
or to lose that weight, if that's what
lose
you
that
want,
weight. Exactly.
Whatever you want.
It's absurd that like you can eat as much food as like I eat, or even you eat, and they're still like, oh, we're cutting right now. You know, it's ridiculous.
I'm like drizzling honey on stuff and everything else.
Dude, like I just adjusted his diet today. He's eating over 500 carbs a day on workout days. And you're weighing right now 170s?
I'm like 174.
Damn. Yeah, dude.
It's a lot.
9%.
And solid.
Yeah.
Solid.
9%. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like a lot of times people would be like, you know, they wouldn't understand. It's like, you're not able to lift the same way, but you still got abs. How's that? It's like, well, your nutrition and your diet is going to have a way bigger effect on your aesthetics than your lifting is.
That's right.
Like, how many people can you, I mean, you just walk into a gym, close your eyes and point, and there's somebody working their ass off and it's still, soft. They don't have any definition.
Right.
It's because, you can't outwork a bad diet. You just simply can't.
Well, and that's like even like my wife, when she worked with you, she lifted a little bit, but she wasn't super consistent with her workouts and whatever else. But she still lost weight because she stuck to the diet, right? Like, you lost weight, you wanted to lose some weight, you lost weight, you lost 27 pounds, right? And, even to, like you were saying, you work out really hard. I mean, like, when I go and work out, I'm working out hard for me, right? And sometimes that depends on like my jiu-jitsu. So like a lot of you guys asked about balancing lifting and jiu-jitsu, right? So if I'm coming into the gym in the morning and I'm a little banged up from jiu-jitsu, then sometimes I dial it back a little bit with the lifting. I still do it, but maybe I just dial it back. I don't push as hard or whatever, or that kind of thing. Or if it's a leg day and I know it's going to be a killer, then I do my leg day and I don't do jiu-jitsu that day because sometimes I'm just spent. But for me, like, go in and do it. And then I remember being really surprised about the fact that I could consume more calories in a lifting day than I could a jiu-jitsu day. So I could go in and lift weights at a moderate clip, do what I was supposed to do, and then I would eat like my workout day food, which is more carbs. And then I'd go in and I'd have a killer jiu-jitsu session, right? But I remember like, thinking like, man, I think I'm doing jiu-jitsu today. I can bump my carbs up, for today. Cause like I did it and I was like, oh, it's like I started seeing the weight gain. I was like, oh, I got to go back. It's like, I don't burn as many calories, so I thought that was super interesting. And then you look into it where you're burning calories for like a longer period of time from the,
yes, you are,
from the lifting. Cause your body has to repair,
Yeah. That's like, and I've said this time and time again, but the basis for fat loss, now I'll say fat loss as opposed to weight loss, but the basis for fat loss is strength training because we have to, stimulate the muscle to maintain that muscle. The body, it needs that stimulus. It's like you're telling your body, listen, we have to keep this muscle. So even as we lean down, we need this muscle because I'm using it. So you have to, keep that strength training intact and keep the intensity in that strength training intact. Not, sometimes people think, well, I'll reduce weight and increase reps to cut. And that's no, the same stress that builds muscle maintains muscle. And also too, it's an interesting point that you made. I feel like too, the calorie output, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are experts in this field, but I feel like the calorie expenditure for someone who's extremely technical with jiu-jitsu, like you had said one day, like some guys can even be like soft looking because they're just so like technically superior to somebody else.
They're efficient.
They're efficient.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes like, you rolling with me, you would burn a lot less calories than if you're rolling with someone on your level because you're able to be way more efficient than I would be.
Oh, sure. Right. I can roll with like most people and, I can wear a heart rate monitor. And I can tell you by looking at it afterwards, like almost like what belt level I was rolling with.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
White belt, I'm down in like, I'm at like 100, 110. Oh, blue belt, we're at the 120s, maybe like just getting into 130. If I'm going with like a tough black belt, I'm sitting in like the 150s to like 170s plus, depending on if we're scrambling or not.
Yeah. Or like you see a heart rate, like if you get aroused or something, like you see the heart rate spike.
Oh,
will you check that too? Sure, you check when it's like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, with me and my wife when we're together, I just like put my heart rate monitor on, be like, hey baby,
let's see what we get up to.
Let's see what we get up to.
Break the record.
See how hard I want to see what my calories I'm burning on this thing are.
Keep some nose torque on the nightstand.
Yeah. So Eli, I've got a question about cutting and stuff. Like so we one of the things that when I did a tournament, like I really wasn't about cutting, but it was about like cardiovascular fitness, being efficient and being having enough gas in the tank. But like there's some things you like to do for kind of cardio for like how do you like to supplement like weight loss with cardio? Like when do you like to do that? And like what's kind of the theory behind it?
Okay. So before I answer that, I do want to touch on one thing that Chewy said.
Okay.
So as far as like the lifting and the jiu-jitsu and everything together, when you're referring to your recovery, so a lot of times people don't think about this, but we can only recover from so much. And that's dependent upon a lot of things, hormone levels and diet, and all these things are considered, but you have a budget for recovery. And I think we've spoke about this, but it's like, think of it like your bank account. You know, if I'm going to buy something and I've only got this much in my account and I've got more than that in my shopping cart, well, then I can't add something to it without taking something out. So a lot of times people think I want to add more and more and more. You know, I want to have a bigger deadlift. So I want to add another day. I want to do this. I want bigger arms. I want to do this, this. It's like, well, you can't just continue to add and still be able to recover the same way.
Yeah.
So you have a budget. And that's where a lot of times, you know, when I'm coaching someone that is a jiu-jitsu athlete, is an MMA athlete, has these sports that are at the forefront of their training, it's like, okay, this is our main dish. Everything else is a side dish to accentuate that. We have to consider that first. And then everything we add to it is meant to complement and help. And if it begins to hinder that recovery, then we have to adjust to make sure that you're able to fit all that in your budget.
What's some signs for people listening? So like, what's some signs that you're like overtraining? Because I think that sometimes when I speak to people, like when I work with people that are training and doing jiu-jitsu and like they're lifting, doing cardio, you know, they're trying to squeeze a lot on their plates. You know, and sometimes they're not managing their stress, they're not eating enough, and they have a lot of signs of overtraining. What are some things that you see as signs of overtraining or things that you look for?
First thing you look at, like one of the first things, it would be like, you know, weight that shouldn't feel heavy starts to feel heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go to work out, it's like, it's, you know, like even in powerlifting, we'll do deload weeks to where you actually lessen the weight for a week. You know, you'll lift a lot less for the sake of recovering the nervous system. You know, the body, like physical tissue, will recover in a few days, but like if you overtax the nervous system, man, it can take a long time, like a week, 2 weeks more to recover. And, you know, so when you push to that point, you know, but then you've essentially gotten to the point that you've not been able to recover and you really need to dial back, do a deload week, so on. But certain signs of overreaching where you're getting close to that point, you know, again, weight starts to feel heavy. You notice that, you know, your sleep can be compromised, just your overall well-being.
My sleep, that's one that always hits me first.
Yep. Almost like, you know, even cognitive function, sometimes it's just like, I can't think straight. I'm
brain
just too
fog
tired.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you'll notice those things. But, you know, and essentially just, you'll see that your output begins to come down in any manner, because progress will always run parallel to recovery. Mm-hmm. And if you don't put recovery first, and this is a very difficult thing for a lot of new athletes to grasp, but recovery has to be in place. Progress will always run parallel to that. If recovery starts to dip off, progress will immediately dip off with it. Mm-hmm. So that has to be the case.
Well, and that's hard for a society that sort of only values pushing action, right? Going, right? Whereas like going back to your idea of aggressive patience, part of that patience is, okay, now it's time to do nothing, or to do the things that you need to do to recover, right? Like to eat the food and to relax or to sleep, to do whatever it is that you got to do to recover, which a lot of times those activities really you're not really doing anything. You're just kind of stepping back from it. And that's hard for a lot of people because all they think about is more action. And then, you know, there's tons of people online, like influencer types. It's like, you know, wake up super early, get no sleep, go hard all the time. And which again, just, it doesn't work. Not for very long.
Not at all. And again, you'll run into that wall at some point. But I've found that people are really good at what they do. The way they do anything is the way they do everything. So like, you know, somebody's really good at jiu-jitsu, like, you know, they're going to, you know, put the same amount of effort and efficiency in every little detail instead of just that finish. And it's the same way with diet, nutrition, recovery. Somebody that's really good in these fields is going to put the same emphasis on the lifting, on the diet, on the recovery. Everything has to be in place. And that's where you get to that level. And your question about cardio.
Well, hold on. Let's touch on that since we're talking about, you know, where things as far as recovery. I mean, obviously sleep is important. Diet's important. What are some other maybe ideas or things that people don't look at or overlook for recovery?
So
I'm going to sleep in an ice bath, sleep in an ice bath with in a hyperbaric chamber with red lights attached to your testicles.
There you go.
That's the thing.
Electric stimulation.
Electric stimulation to your testicles is something that's often overlooked.
Kids, that's only for professionals.
I use a battery tender. I'll sleep with a battery tender. Just not like a high amount of voltage, just enough that, like, you know, that the battery doesn't run dead.
By the way, he's not being serious.
You get one of those batteries from like a little like one of like little kids Tonka truck toys.
Well, it depends on what you're hooking it to.
Okay. Oh,
You know what I'm saying? Like
okay.
it, you know, if that battery will run your Tonka toy, then yeah, absolutely. But sometimes you have to get like a, you know, something with a lot of cold cranking amps.
All right. All right. What about, all right. So what are some untapped, besides testicular e-stim, what are some untapped recovery ideas?
So,
God,
you know,
bless.
right now, yeah, we're here all week, folks.
Eli always gets very tickled when he like gets me to break.
I love it. That's what I look
Yeah,
for.
he's like,
Yeah.
I got him to
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
Yep.
I'll get to tip your server.
We'll
Try the veal.
We'll need some good jokes. We'll get end with some good good Eli jokes.
But so, you know, there's always going to be, what's the you know, you think of like the Octom's razor. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Chewy does. You know what I'm talking about.
Occam's razor. Yeah.
Simply put, thinking of the simple things first.
Sure.
You know,
Okay.
you know, if I use Octom's razor, somebody's not recovering. Well, first thing I'm gonna do is cut away the unnecessary junk and look and say, okay, well, is your diet okay?
Yep.
Are you eating enough to actually recover? How's your sleep? Are you sleeping good? Okay. And if I'm checking off all these simple boxes, then I'll begin to look at more complex things. You know, okay, maybe at a point we look at your blood work. Okay. Are your hormones okay? Your thyroid function, these things are, you know, how's all that? You know, are you consuming a ton of caffeine and your endocrine system is just, you know, your adrenal system rather is compromised. You know, there's certain things to look at. And your question was what to look at or how to,
I mean, if there's anything that's kind of untapped or people overlook. I mean, I think a lot of times.
Well, here's one, right? Like what are some common things that people just overlook for recovery? You know, that like when you're working with clients, right? Like what are some common things that people just overlook when it comes to recovery?
Gotcha. Yeah. I was still thinking the e-stim. But
need them cold cranking amps.
Cold cranking amps, man.
Yeah.
That's country boy for you right there.
When it's got a lot of compression, it takes something to turn that motor over.
I think I thought about doing that like with like Luca whenever he gets of age and we get him one of those little trucks that he can drive, like hooking up like a bigger battery to it. Cause you can do that. You can get like a bigger battery for him.
Come on. Yeah. I'll take part.
So he go faster.
Yeah.
He's got to have that one uncle that helps him do crazy stuff. I'm happy to be there.
Okay.
Like that's
but
hey, call him the Funkle.
That's
Fun
right.
Uncle.
Come
Funkle.
on. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, Funkles.
So common recovery tips that people overlook.
So
hey, we've been on this for about 20 minutes. I don't know if we're ever getting through it.
But
e-stim, I think we just stick with e-stim and move on.
Yeah, just stick with that.
Yeah, no, all right.
But no, again, first and foremost, look at the simple things. You know, look at the diet. Look at the you know, your sleep patterns. Look, I mean, honestly, are you consuming enough water? You know, little things like that people tend to overlook because it's the simple things. They think it has to be something complex, and 9 times out of 10, it is not.
Yeah.
You know, across the board in that matter. But
no, I'm just, you said it doesn't have to be complicated. And I'm just, you know, it's like, I see so much like stuff like over the years where like, you know, like I've met people who have worked with you who are like, I've got so much energy now because they eat right. When as before they were like, man, I just, you know, I need to get my, I might have a adrenal fatigue or something, you know, like all, you know, all this stuff where it's like, you know, basically if you know that, like, say, for instance, the population of the United States, as an example, collectively mostly eats like shit.
Sure.
I mean, you know what I mean? So like, of course, everyone feels terrible. You're eating terrible. Like you're throwing cruddy fuel down the trap, down your gullet, and you think that somehow your body's supposed to just run well. And so, you know, everybody's tired and fatigued. They don't know why. They're crushing caffeine. They're not sleeping, and they eat terribly. They don't exercise. And then so everybody's selling them this like magical thing. Oh no, it's parasites.
Yep.
You've got parasites. That's what it is. It's like, and everybody's searching for that one simple answer, opposed to like, hey bro, you got to stop eating like an asshole. You need to go out and exercise. You need to go for a walk, get some morning sun, like really simple stuff, drink more water.
But the problem is
go to sleep. Stop scrolling at night and go to sleep.
And that's not a sexy answer.
It's not.
And that's the thing is like the truth behind this, like the bodybuilding and all these things, it's not as sexy as everybody wants to make it out to be. Like it's really boring. It's really simple.
I don't think anything's really sexy. Even jiu-jitsu, like the crazy cool highlight. You know, because like with bodybuilding, you'll get the highlight video where, you know, they show them at the middle of the they're like, "Rrr," like, you know, grunting and stuff. They've got the motivational music, but then they leave out like as soon as that workout's done, he goes and eats a shake and he takes a nap or something, right? Sure. Or the you know, in jiu-jitsu, you know, they get the guys when they're having the scraps, where they're having the hard rolls, they're going full speed, but then they don't show all the like really like boring situational work or you know, that kind of stuff. Exactly. You know, it's like it's like most of the stuff that really that really moves the needle is not very exciting. It's very boring.
Yeah, and all those moments are there because of all that work done far away from the spotlight.
That's right.
That you've done that's just boring and routine, and you do it day in and day out, and it, you know, and that's where people break too, is they don't get that, you know, they go into all this stuff thinking it's going to be some, you know, this amazing experience. It's going to be so fun and so cool, and everybody's going to think I'm awesome. It's like, no, you're going to do the same thing every single day, eat the same way every single day. You're going to live like a dog. You're going to be structured, and people break. But as far as the recovery, you know, again, check the simple things first. Outside of that, there are some things that you can do. You know, if you notice that, you know, your blood panels come back and something is off, there's certain supplementations that you can use. You can see, you know, clinics to help with all that. There's things that you can, so the word supplement doesn't mean to replace. Like, we're not just simply taking supplements blindly because this guy told me to, or that's what this guy takes. We're taking supplements to supplement our diet. If you're spending more money on supplements than you are on nutrition, then you've lost already. It's like, you know, get everything you can from your nutrition, and any holes in there, we will add with supplementation. Looks like someone wrote NAD and glutathione and so on. Sure. Yeah. Glutathione's great. It helps with, you know, liver enzymes and so on, and you know, organ tissue healing and so on. And in certain situations, that's a great addition. NAC is a great addition with that glutathione also. But, you know, there's things to look at, and that's going to be in a case-to-case basis, but from simply 99% of people, man, it's going to be the simple stuff, you know?
All right. So we talked about a little bit of cardio, like what kind of cardiovascular stuff to do, exercises to do to help supplement cutting.
Yes.
And there's some things that you like to implement. What is the kind of theory, the reasoning behind cardio as far as like to help with, you know, cutting and things like that?
So the way we begin to lose weight is to eat less than we are burning.
Sure.
Okay. So consuming less calories, being in caloric deficit is what that's referred to. The way we lose fat is being in a caloric deficit while eating enough to maintain the muscle and stimulating the muscle. Now, so we can go about this a couple ways. Now, when we begin to look at everything, yes, cardio exercise is good for our heart. It's good for our health. So having that in there is great. We can look at this a couple of different ways. It's like, okay, well, now I'm burning X amount of calories. So, or I'm burning X amount of calories. So I need to consume this many to be under. Now, I can reduce the amount of calories I'm consuming, or I can increase the amount of calories I'm burning. That's the two things I can do there to put me in a greater deficit. So you have some people, like when we're cutting and say we're doing a bodybuilding show, I don't mind being hungry. So sometimes I would lessen cardio just and eat less. Some people would begin to break from not eating as much. And then it's easier just to give them some more cardio. It's like, okay, just, you know, we'll increase your steps throughout the day, or we'll add another session, or we'll do this. Now, again, that is just a tool to increase the deficit you're in. Okay. Now, because you'll see, like whenever we were cutting, sometimes I might not adjust your food, but I might adjust your cardio. That's just simply putting you in a bigger deficit. Now, when we're looking at it from the standpoint of now we're working with an athlete who has an event, and it is a performance-based event. So, and I was talking to this on another podcast last week, but like the prep for an aesthetics event like bodybuilding versus a performance event like jiu-jitsu, fighting, these things is entirely different. You know, if you feel like shit at a bodybuilding show, okay, as long as you can pose and you look good, who cares? Deal with it. It's part of the game.
Sure.
If you feel like shit when you take the mat, that's a problem. You know, we're not going to perform at our best.
Yeah.
So there too, we even consider that cardio. So, you know, looking at, you know, we've got the cardio in there to help with the caloric deficit and so on, but also using that cardio in a way that is going to, again, accentuate that main goal, you know, doing our HIIT cardio, to kind of recreate the ups and downs and the sprints and bursts and periods of lessened intensity. Doing the steady state cardio, which I've found helps regain, your normal heart rate a little bit better whenever you get, at a position there. And then doing that to, again, complement that main goal. As far as types, again, that's relative to the individual, and also relative to the sport. So a lot of times with jiu-jitsu guys, if they can, I like doing an echo bike because that is a no impact type cardio. If you're constantly, again, playing a game that is compromising your joints, I don't really want you out doing a ton of running and sprints for your only source of cardio and just continuing to beat your knees up and your ankles and your spine and everything else. So doing those low impact types of cardio can be helpful. And those are easy ways to do those interval trainings. For bodybuilding and stuff, I really enjoyed the bike because it was more anabolic. I'm working muscle. Like with jogging, I'm just falling forward over and over. But with a cycle, I'm actually having to engage and use muscle and push. Same with like a step mill, like a Stairmaster, I would use it. If I did use a treadmill, I'd put it on an incline, so I'm at least climbing and using muscle. So I like doing more anabolic forms of cardio so that, because I don't want to be built like a long distance runner, that's not going to help me, on the stage, or, I want to maintain that muscle that I've worked so hard to build while increasing that cardio.
What about when to do it? Like, is there a certain time you recommend? I guess it depends on what your needs are, what you're training for, but like, first thing in the morning versus before a meal, after a meal, like, what kind of impact does that play?
So the one time that I do suggest my clients don't do cardio is before their strength training. Because I want you to, again, like we have to maintain muscle, we have to have enough intensity in that workout to do so. We have to have enough intensity in that workout to cause the sort of stress that is going to maintain that muscle and give our body signals to keep it.
Yep.
So I don't like doing cardio beforehand. If you want to walk a little bit to warm up your joints, whatever the case is, okay, great. But don't do a big hard cardio session before you lift. I want you feeling good for your lifting session. Because you're going to be able to do cardio even if you're tired after, so I like doing it either post-workout. Fasted cardio feels real good, as far as I feel it's very effective. But for most people with, their schedule, a lot of time, everybody's busy. So what I tell people is like, if you can do it fasted, great. If you can do it post-workout, great. The next best option is any time of day that you can get it in. Because again, if you say in this cardio session, you're burning 200 calories, that's going to be burning 200 calories if you're doing it the way I want you to at any point in the day. A lot of times we, get fixated on, this perfect timing and perfect this. If you're getting all the work done, if you're doing the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. So again, if you can get it fasted, awesome. If you can do it post-workout, great. If you can't, get it done at some point in the day just to get that work done. And that's going to be beneficial.
Well, having that flexibility, I was talking to someone about this back in December. Like when we think of discipline, and I think we probably talked about this idea before. To me, discipline, is flexible, right? Because it's you can go into the day, and people have done this where they have this very rigid plan. I'm going to do this at this time, this at this time, this time, right? And then if something, because it always happens, stuff just happens.
Yes.
All of a sudden, your schedule gets thrown off. And you'll see a lot of people who just sort of throw their hands up in the air. Oh, I couldn't do it. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or you can figure out another time to do it today, because the disciplined approach is to like get it done no matter what, not to like say, oh, my perfect plan didn't work. Like, no, like be flexible, like figure out when else could you do this. And I think that sometimes, especially for a lot of us, we're all busy, we all got stuff going on.
Absolutely.
You really, like, especially with like lifting training and all that stuff. It's sometimes you just have to literally you got to look at, I've got 30 minutes right now. Let me squeeze it in.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, and that's just how it has to happen. I mean, that's how it is for me sometimes. It's like, sometimes I'm just busy and I'm like, oh, I got to get it in right now because this is the only time of my day I can get it in. When you get it in, it's better than it's not. So I think for a lot of people, when we think of discipline, one of the words that should also come with that is not just this sort of hard, rigid, I always wake up at this time, I always do this thing at this time. Like, be flexible, because you're going to have to be, because life's too uncertain.
Yeah. And that's the thing is if I'm disciplined, then, I don't have to be motivated. I don't have to constantly, have this source of motivation. A lot of times I'll do things and man, it's the last thing I want to do. But I've said that I would, and that's part of what's going to get me to that ultimate goal. That's, trading that instant gratification for the long-term goal. And that really comes back to a lot of self-restraint, which is a big part of discipline. Not just doing what you're supposed to, but also not doing what you shouldn't.
Sure.
And it all goes together. But a lot of times you see it's a lot of times the guys, harping on ego are the guys that have ego.
Oh, sure.
And a lot of times you see a lot of the guys that are harping on discipline. A lot of times it's like, dude, if you had it, I'd see it.
Yeah. You don't have to talk about it.
You don't have to. It's like, you don't have to tell me you're in really good shape. I can look and see it.
Yeah.
It's,
sure. People a lot of times they project to sort of show off to compensate. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you'll see the most like unconfident guy in the room try to put on this air of confidence or, bark super loudly because deep down you're very insecure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. So this is something I thought about with me as the years have gone by. I sort of find ways that I get really I get motivated by sort of the after effect. So for instance, as an example, like when I get up in the morning, sometimes to lift, it's early and I freaking hate lifting early. I don't like it. But it's like, sometimes it's like I either lift early or I don't lift. So we're just lifting early. Right. So, but one of the things is that like, I like the way that I feel after I'm done.
Yes.
Because after I'm done lifting, I feel good. Like my body's awake, my
endorphins
I feel great. Yeah. So a lot of times, like when I'm going in there, like when I'm going into the gym, I'm not really focused on, I feel like crap now. I'm thinking, man, in a little bit, I'm gonna feel pretty good. And what I'll usually do is I'll have my cup of coffee after my lift's over. So then it's like, it's my reward afterwards. Like, hey, after you get done, you get some caffeine in you, buddy. And same thing with jiu-jitsu, right? Like sometimes I'll go into the gym and I don't feel great. I'm busy. I've like had a long day and my brain's fried, but I'm like, let's get to the warm up. And as soon as we get this done, you're going to feel good. Even same thing with dieting. Like sometimes like, when you're like, it hasn't been a while because I haven't had a hard cut, but I remember like when I was cutting weight for that first time. And we got down to like 196 at one point, and I was cutting weight. There was a couple times where I was like, man, I just want to eat like something, whatever. But I'm like, no, I'm gonna eat this. And when I'm done eating the meal, I'm full, like, or satiated, and I feel better because I know it's like leading. So, do you have anything like that where, like, because again, a lot of times we think of like discipline and doing stuff, even if you don't want to do it, whatever. But for me, like a lot of the stuff that I do, I don't necessarily have to. I don't have to force myself to do it because I sort of get attached to what's going to happen afterwards.
Yes.
I don't know if you do that, but that's something that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've found, people that excel in their fields, like, yourself and Eugene, like the things that you're going to need, you do them. It's like, you don't have to want to do them. You don't have to be motivated to do them. Motivation's an emotion. Like you can put on the right song and motivate somebody. But, discipline is doing something you said you was going to do long after that feeling you had when you said it's gone. And for me, a lot of times for me, honestly, my driving factor are the people that I work with, because, I believe in leading from the front, and I feel like I can't tell you to, fix an issue that you have or to really pull it together if I'm not doing the same.
Yeah.
And I refuse to ask you to do something that I won't. And so a lot of times I know, even coaching myself with nutrition and lifting, I know that my clients see me and they are watching me for that. So that's a big source of, it is a big source of motivation. It's probably the biggest source of motivation for me, but also it keeps me in check because I know they're looking to me like at my gym, like I feel like the keystone. And what I mean by that is like, I feel like if I fall out of place, everything falls with me.
Of course.
And, so it's like, I can't necessarily lead you and tell you what you need to be doing if I refuse to do it myself. So that's a big source of motivation for me, but also I know what it feels like to not, be in that position, of not being able to train, not being able to do the things that I really enjoy doing. And anything that's going to take me farther from that, whether it be like veering off course with my diet or veering off course with my cardio or my lifting or anything, is going to get me farther from where I want to be and I need to be and people expect me to be. So it's like, it just simply, I don't give myself that option in my mind.
There is a bit of that, right? If you're in a leadership position, right, where you put yourself to a higher standard, and it's not to say that you're perfect. I was talking to my wife about this before, you know, like we, like, you know, there's certain things that I've talked to her before. I'm like, I don't get to partake in these certain activities because I can't, because if I was to do that, like you said, then like the people that I'm, you know, trying to help, the people in the gym that I'm leading, like it's not going to go well, and that's going to knock me out of whack. And if you're in a leadership position and you're supposed to be the sort of the centering energy of the whole damn thing, right? Well, then that's going to throw the whole sort of, you know, kingdom into disarray. Because everybody's like looking at the leader going, oh, he's screwed up and all this. And we're all screwed up to some degree, of course. But I'm saying, like, there's certain behaviors that if you're a leader, you don't get to partake in if you're trying to lead people and try to help make them better and that sort of thing. Because once they lose that confidence in you, or once you go a certain direction, they're not going to follow. Right. And that takes away your ability to help people out.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, like, you know, and again, like, you know, like you said, they're leading by example. And then also like what you, you know, inside of the gym and stuff, you know, not only that, but like setting a tone for things, you know, like I had a guy and he was dealing with an injury, and, you know, he was saying, well, man, I probably won't be able to do this, or I probably won't do it. I was like, dude, you just shut up, stop. Like, don't even say that. Like, why say it? You know, why even put your mind in that position? Because you're rehearsing that happening in your mind. Like, don't even think about that. Like, you know, just like, don't bring that energy in here.
Well, that's like
that defeatist mindset.
Sometimes there's that woo idea of manifesting. You're going to manifest it, which obviously there's some dumb stuff that goes with it. You're not going to just think about it and then it magically appears, right? You got to do the work. But you see people that will manifest bad situations
100%
because they go into everything with this sort of mindset. So you're making it happen because as soon as you walk into it, you're bringing that energy with you. So you're not going to get a good result.
Well, it's like you're thinking about buying a new car, and you're online and you're looking at this car. You know, I want this car. I love this car. I'm looking at these pictures. Well, what do you notice? Like that following week, you see that damn car everywhere. Anytime you're out, you see that car. You pass it everywhere. Everybody's driving this car. Like, what the hell? It's not that all of a sudden everyone bought that car. It's that now you're aware of it. That's all you're thinking about. And you're looking and you're seeing it. Well, it's the same concept whenever you start thinking about that shit here. It's like anything that feels off in that exercise, like, man, I knew it. God, I'm going to get hurt again. I'm going to do this shit again. And you set that tone in your mind. And, you know, it's like, don't let that shit harbor in your head, man. Like, you know, and it's, to me, it's just simple. It's like, my head's messed up enough, man. I don't want anything in there bouncing around that's going to hinder me.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a good point, right? Because I mean, I think about, you know, we're all guilty of it. We all get stuck in our ruts. And it's interesting where, you know, shaking out of that, how much things change when you simply not allow yourself to just go down to that negative rabbit hole, you know, and change your perspective on things. Like you were talking about earlier. Okay, you're injured. Well, I can't do this, that, whatever. Okay. Or you can be like, well, I can pick up this dumbbell and I can do a goblet squat or something, you know, whatever
What can you do?
What can you do?
Yeah. What can you do? And, you know, and that's the thing is like from, you know, a leadership position or a friend position, if somebody cares about you, man, they'll call you out on that. I think about Mike Tyson, and, you know, like Mike Tyson was talking and he said, you know, whenever he was getting out of shape, Mike was fat. And he's like, everybody's saying, man, how you doing, Mike? You look great. You look great. It's good to see you, man. You look awesome.
Because they're not his real friends.
Exactly right. And he seen Freddie Roach, and Freddie said, what the fuck happened to you? He said, what do you mean? He's like, you look like shit. You're fat as hell. And that got Mike on the treadmill instantly. And it's like, you know, that's the only guy that loved him out of that whole bunch, you know, because like he wanted to see him do better because he knew he could do better.
But like, but when you care about someone, sometimes people like they mistakenly think that means that you can't criticize them or call them out on their bullshit. But you know, sometimes it's like that means I do love you. Yes. Because I'm calling you out on it, and I don't want to see you go down that path. And that's hard for a lot of people because, you know, some people that they don't take it very well, you know, but it's like, I'm doing this because I do care about you.
Yeah. And it takes a great deal of maturity to understand that. You know, I had somebody once say, they said, well, I didn't tell them that because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. It's like, well, no, it's not that you didn't want to hurt their feelings. You just didn't want to risk them being upset with you or not liking you.
That's it.
That's what it is. Like, you didn't care so much about their feelings that you really were hesitant to say that. You didn't want them to think less of you or think you were a dick or not like you, right? You know, and if you had their best interest in mind, you'd tell them.
It's a tough conversation to have, though. sometimes with people, but it's necessary because
it is. And it's, and how you go about it is everything.
Sure.
And they have to understand it comes from a place of caring, and they have to trust your judgment on it. And that comes back to coaching too.
Yeah. Chewy?
Yeah. So let's touch on sport specific lifting versus like sort of a general approach and some stuff for jiu-jitsu. For you guys that are listening right now, if you guys want to, while we're talking about this, you're welcome to drop in some comments or questions, things like that, like questions that you have for any of us. And we'll answer a couple of them, and we'll give away a couple gifts while we're here. So if you guys want to ask a question, throw it into the chat, and we'll move on. So as far as lifting goes, so I get this thing all the time where, you know, I'll post every now and then a video of me lifting, and, you know, there's some specific stuff there that, you know, could potentially be there to help support me with jiu-jitsu and things like that. But overall, my you know, you write it, it's like I'm doing a generalized program with a few things tweaked. But, you know, for me, I feel great on that. I've done everything under the sun, from like super sport specific to jiu-jitsu, if you want to say it that way, to I did some strongman back in the day. I thought that was neat. I did some powerlifting stuff back in the day. I did CrossFit for a while, you know, which was a disaster. You know, like I don't recommend anybody like combining CrossFit and jiu-jitsu together. I think it's just too much. You know, if you want to do CrossFit workouts like at a sort of a non-competitive pace, then maybe like just circuit training and stuff, but not getting in there like, all right, let's do this WOD and I'm going to try to win. You know, I just think it's too much. But then, you know, doing the bodybuilding stuff and hypertrophy style stuff with you, like, it's interesting. I feel better lifting the way that I lift now, where like the weight is typically a little bit on the moderate end. It's not super, super heavy. And I've been able to do it more consistently without having to take breaks. It feels better, and my physique changed for the better. So there's a lot of positives. And even like my body, when I'm like in jiu-jitsu, like I've noticed that, like, for instance, doing things like where we do pauses and things of that nature, slow eccentrics, I'm able to hold positions in certain ways a little bit longer. Like if I'm framing and pushing away from someone on the bottom, sometimes you have to maintain a hold for more than like a split second. And
isometric strength.
That's right. You know, so there's certain things. So what is your thoughts on like lifting, you know, and towards jiu-jitsu?
So again, anything that we do, if the idea is we're coaching an athlete for a specific event or a specific sport, is meant to complement that specific event or that specific sport. When we're looking at a jiu-jitsu athlete, you know, we have to consider what their body's going to be going through and what their body's going to need to be able to endure, and you know, how to improve upon that. With that being said, you know, the things we think about with jiu-jitsu, one, again, we want to maintain joint health. And if we're lifting in a way that is going to compromise our joints, that's certainly not going to help our jiu-jitsu. So how do we make lightweight feel heavy? We move it slowly. So tempo work, I've found, works exceptionally well for the jiu-jitsu athlete, and I use that a great deal. And what I mean by tempo work, so you have, like, with a muscle, you have concentric and eccentric. That's the shortening and the lengthening of the muscle. So the eccentric on a lift would be the lowering of the weight where the muscle's stretching. So like, for instance, on a bench press, the eccentric would be the lowering where my chest is lengthening. The concentric would be the pressing where my chest is shortening. So slowing down that eccentric and doing timed eccentrics, even pauses on some of these movements, you know, do a 5-second eccentric and a pause at the bottom, 2-second pause, whatever. You get used to holding that weight. Now, you couldn't do this with exceptionally heavy weight. Like, if it's a big percentage of your max, good luck. You know, you might not even get 1 rep. But with that, it's teaching you to, one, control that weight, which is going to, you know, a lot of times with new clients, that's such a game changer, because you teach them how to feel the weight, because they're just trying to pump out.
Going back to how we were talking about lifting, right? Like making sure you're actually feeling it in the muscles you're trying to target.
A lot of times I'll refer to that as a mechanical phase. And like, even if somebody wants to do bodybuilding, you know, we'll go through a mechanical phase to help them learn how to control that weight and actually feel that exercise in the muscles that I want them to, instead of just mindlessly throwing the weight around. Another thing, those pauses and that control of it is going to have a good carryover to isometric strength. Again, to your point, like the framing and holding positions, that holding power, you know, especially like you know, you're doing a row So we're doing a barbell row and I've got a 2-second pause at the top. I have to really engage and hold that barbell against my stomach, and I'm fighting to hold it there. And then 5, 4, 3, 2, slowly opening my back and lowering that weight. You know, and then going to failure inside of those. Like, I don't think a lot of times people understand like failure in so we throw that term around a lot, like I went to failure, I'm going to failure, I'm doing that. Well, what does that actually mean? Like when we go to failure on something, that means that we can no longer mechanically move that weight correctly with the muscles we're trying to use. Now we have concentric failure, which means we can't lift it again, but we also have eccentric failure. So like what I mean by that is, like, say you have where you can, like, if I'm lowering that weight, say I've got 100 pounds on the bar, how much do I have to apply to lower it? Less than 100.
So 100 depends on how fast you're moving it, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So if I apply 99, it's going to move like a sundial, man. It's going to take forever. If I apply 5, boom, it hits me in the chest. So whenever we're really doing that slow eccentric, I'm getting more work out of the eccentric side because the same muscles that lift weight lowers it.
Yep.
You know, I'm still using my chest. I'm still applying force to lower that bar. Otherwise, I just drop it. So the chest, you know, all those pressing muscles, my delts, my triceps, my chest, all that's activated as I'm lowering it slowly. And then I have to engage more than the weight on the bar to lift it. Okay. When I can no longer engage more than the weight on the bar, that's concentric failure. When I can no longer control it on the eccentric, that is eccentric failure. So sometimes, like for myself, if I've got someone there to spot me, or I pull one of my guys at the gym, I'll have them help me go to concentric failure. Then as I'm, like, say I'm doing pull downs, I'll have them assist me pulling it down and then let me control it up. And then when I can no longer even control it up, that's eccentric failure. This is an advanced form of training, but like going to that point too, like, but again, you know, being mindful of those reps, being intentional, and then, you know, to train this way is very effective. There's been many bodybuilders trained in this manner, but like, the thing that it causes you to do really is you really do have to not care what the person next to you thinks, because you're not going to handle a ton of weight this way. But I promise you, you'll get to where you can handle a ton of weight in any way you choose if you do it long enough. Like, you know, I was able to bounce back and forth from bodybuilding and then do powerlifting in the off season. And I'd been training this way. Maybe I hadn't even bench pressed, you know, during the whole prep for the bodybuilding show, but I'd been doing things in this manner. So the control I had, the power I had, you know, once I switched gears, it was all there.
And then, you know, for jiu-jitsu people, what are some different muscle groups or different areas that maybe, like, if, like, let's say if you have an athlete coming into a jiu-jitsu practitioner coming into you who is wanting to start a lifting program or whatever, are there things that you'll program in there for them, or are there certain things that you look to add in for jiu-jitsu athletes regards to lifting?
Is it a new jiu-jitsu guy or a guy that's been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time?
We'll say it's a person that's been training for, let's say, like 5 or 6 years. So they've been training for a little while.
Work on that upper back.
Right?
Open them up.
Sure.
Because a lot of times you'll have this. They'll have protraction in the shoulders and their scapula will be elevated, even when they stand here like this.
Oh yeah.
And you know, helping them utilize that back and work that back a bit more and get it opened up.
You look at any jiu-jitsu class after it's over, you'll see a bunch of rounded shoulders because that's our posture to fight.
Yeah. And even boxers, you know, you roll the shoulders, you're fighting, you know,
sure. You think, I mean, well, if you think about like most animals like mammals, right? They walk around on all fours. And so their most vulnerable areas are covered.
Sure.
Right. Whereas ours is wide open. We're on 2 feet. So in order to cover our most compromised areas, pretty much every fighting art involves coming in to protect, because that's the way that we're, you know, humans are, right? So like you think about boxing, kickboxing, we're here. You think about jiu-jitsu and wrestling, it's here. Everything is about closing off that space. And so you develop that, like you said, that those rounded shoulders, that rounded back. Yeah.
And you can see that in someone's posture. In the gym, in the bodybuilding world, you'll see guys that pay way more emphasis and attention and give more emphasis to the anterior muscles. And all they want to do is bench press. And they don't think about posterior muscles, and they'll get that. The shoulders will protract, and it almost like their palms are facing backwards.
They look like a bulldog.
Yeah.
Like they're walking around, and they're kind of like that because they don't have any upper back muscles.
Yep. And you're setting yourself up for injury there.
Yeah.
Big time.
Well, yeah. Cause your shoulder's sitting out of its proper alignment.
And, you know, and then like even your skeletal structure isn't in alignment. Like everything's just tight and bowed up, so like a lot of times that would be the case is working that upper back and getting them to open up if they've not been lifting correctly and they've not worked on that.
Okay.
But you want to think of what's going to carry over best. Compound movements are going to carry more bang for your buck. And what I mean by compound movements are things that are causing you to move more than one joint at a time. Like a barbell row is going to do way more for the jiu-jitsu athlete than a bicep curl. I have to pick between the two.
Yeah.
Doing things that are going to engage, because everything's working together when you're doing jiu-jitsu. Like you're not just using one little thing at a time sometimes, but so using those compound movements, squats, deadlifts, barbell rows, presses, these things to work as much muscle as you can, and learn to control that through those movements. And working them through the full range of motion too. Especially, with jiu-jitsu, because, you think of like these positions where I can be compromised. Well, if somebody's, and me and you had this discussion, like you'll put me in a position where I'm stretched out and I can't use big, strong muscles, and if you're doing, a movement and you're not opening up and really working from those weakened positions, then you're way more at risk of injury when you get put into those positions. And that was something even I had to do after my surgeries, is I didn't have that range of motion for so long. So I was extremely weak in those new ranges. So had to really work on that. Yeah. But again, working through the full range of motion, and doing compound movements is going to be a big, big help.
Yeah. And, for any of you guys that get onto a program like that, a big part of that too is you got to, I hate saying it this way, but you got to take your pride or your ego out of it, because a lot of, when you get into the gym, if you're moving things slowly, if you're getting to these full ranges of motion, this means that, the weight might come down. But for me, as like a jiu-jitsu practitioner of, 20 plus years, grappler, I've been grappling for 25-ish years, 25, 26 years. Like I like lifting lighter weight, where I can really stimulate the muscle, and like my body feels good afterwards. Like if I do a squat session, like not really a squat session, but a leg day, which has squats in it, I feel pretty good afterwards. Like, my legs are, jello-y, and my muscles feel like banged up, as far as they feel strained, or they've done something, but my joints don't hurt. Whereas if I was just to get under the bar, let's put some heavy weight on here and squat. I remember, probably about 6-7 years ago, in my early 30s, and I would get in there and I, put some heavier weight on the squat bar and squat, and it would hurt. Like I'd get done, get back home, and like I'd feel a little bit of the muscles, but my knees would hurt.
Sure.
Now it's like my knees don't hurt, at all. And I've had surgeries on them, and they have all kinds of stuff going on. But for the most part, like I was thinking about this yesterday because I turned 40. I feel better at 40 physically than I did when I was 30. Like when I get out of bed, like I remember at 30, I was getting out of bed and like crackling and popping and stiff, and I'd be walking up the stairs all funny. Now I get up out of bed, I can immediately drop into like a squat to pick something up, no problem. I don't have any issues going in with my hips or my legs or nothing. And I think a big part of that one is, like with you learning how to like target, rehab myself in certain areas and do it as maintenance. Then with you with like cleaning up my diet, I remember that was one of the big things that changed. It was, oh wow, like if I eat this way, I don't have any inflammation. Like my fingers don't feel anything, my knees don't feel anything. But then if I, go off the rails, I feel it, right? So it's like a great incentive to keep eating a good diet. And then the lifting that way, we're really slowing the weight down, focusing on that full range of motion, having these pauses and these eccentrics and everything else. It made a big difference where I could lift more often and feel absolutely no joint issues, which which is great, because again, doing jiu-jitsu and stuff, like obviously, like you said, you got to take care of your joints. And so, when I look at like 40, like I'm doing a hell of a lot better than I was at 30. Recovery is not as great. I could still recover faster when I was 30,
sure.
But, overall, like how I feel, like getting up in the morning, I feel better, so.
Yeah. And like, you think about like when you have a technique really down in jiu-jitsu, it doesn't take a lot of power to apply that, and you're efficient and you're very technical, and it doesn't take a lot of power to apply that technique correctly. The same way with lifting, it doesn't take, I can use my form is good enough. And if your form is good enough, you know, you can use lesser weight and really flex. And when you're controlling those tempo movements and stuff, you can get that muscle to really activate when you're really targeting that muscle, you know, and it doesn't take, you know, you can do that a lot of times when you fix somebody's form and you really break it down to doing it exactly as they should, especially with, you know, oscillating movements where we're really targeting one muscle. They'll be surprised at how little weight it actually takes.
Oh yeah.
To really target that muscle, you know, like even those lateral raises, like you get somebody to sit just right, take the traps out, no swinging.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think I picked up 20, 25s or something. And then by the end of it, I think I was using like 12s or 12 and a halves or 15 or so. It was like dropped in half. But then like by the end of it, it's like my, you know, my medial delt was like twitching, you know, because I'm hitting it in a way that it was not used to.
Yes.
You know, and even the beautiful part about that too, like when you travel, sometimes you get to those crappy little, you know, like hotel gyms and stuff, and you're like, well, this is all I've got. If you know how to work with it, like you can still get something there, even if you don't have like super heavy weight to use, you can still get a lot of workout.
I have guys say, you know, like, well, my gym, you know, this, if I was going to lift here, man, their dumbbells only went up to 50 or this, I would go to Planet Fitness, but they've only got this. And it's like, well, do you know how to lift weights?
Yeah.
Or do you know how to lift weights? Because if you do, you can get something out of it.
Well, it goes back to what are you going to do? What can you do?
Absolutely.
But the upper back, for any of you guys listening, upper back's huge. Like that'll take a lot of injuries out of the way for your shoulders. And even like I used to get really bad muscle spasms in my upper back because there was this constant battle going on between my overly tight like muscles in the front and the weakened muscles in the back that are constantly pulling. I'd get these really bad muscle spasms. Yeah. I don't get them anymore.
Yeah. Weak things break. Strong things don't hurt.
That's right.
And the most important thing I think is full range of motion, strengthening throughout the full range.
Yes, sir.
Not limited, because that's where you're vulnerable. That's where your tissue is vulnerable to failure. That's where, you know, submissions usually occur, and end ranges. That's where damage occurs. You know, Kimuras, Americanas. Not over here. It's at the very end. You know, when full range of motion. I mean, you're only as strong as your weakest area. So
yeah, like you know, and that's the thing is like you'll have guys they'll half squat.
Oh, yeah, the bro squats.
Yeah, they'll half squat.
I wouldn't even call them a half squat. Sometimes it's like a 3/4 squat.
Yeah,
like,
what is that? Yeah,
it just want to put some weight on a bar and tell people how. Or you see even the leg press. You'll see guys slap, and then their knee barely bends. Like I mean, it's like they're
got it.
And you know, and they'll brag about that weight. You know, it's like, well, I squatted X amount, and it's like measuring your wiener from behind your balls. You know, it's like, like, but
I'm gonna cut a compilation of just like one-liners.
Have you listened to him and his buddy the other podcast? It's like I feel like he's in the same boat.
I love the clips.
He's sitting there talking, and then
I set him up all the time.
Yeah. He's like just like, damn it, like
king of the one-liners. Yeah. I love it.
But
you know what we're talking about.
But again, like you think of like a pressing movement, you're only as strong as you are when the joint is under the most amount of flexion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well,
like if you're at the bottom of the squat and your knees and your hips are under the most amount of flexion, that muscle stretched out. If you can't come out of the bottom, you can't stand up. You know, and same with bench press. You come to your chest, you're under the most amount of flexion here. If you can't press out of that, that's why like in competition for lifts, there is judged under a great deal of scrutiny. It's like your femur has to break below parallel. You know, the bar has to come to a stop on your chest. All these things.
Yeah, because you'll get the benching competitions will have like a pause.
Right, they'll pause
at somewhat.
Yeah. So sometimes they'll have like a pause to it, right? Opposed to just like
or bouncing, like your butt can't come off the bench, your feet can't move. You know, all these things.
Yeah. Yep. All right, we'll do some Q&A.
Let's do some Q&A.
Let's do it. I don't understand quite what the first part is there, Chewy, but
what's that?
We can
what's the first part?
Funny enough, I'm going to be meeting my day
for the first time this year. Let's see, go back down. Maybe he met his dad for the first time.
I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
If you had to pin it down to one or two exercises, what would you recommend to prevent jiu-jitsu injuries? I mean, you got to go for it. You got to throw your stuff in there, but I think it's like it really depends on the person, right? Like what kind of issue? Because like you were saying, like for me, I used to have really bad it would happen like once a year where I would be doing something and I would have like a muscle spasm in my back where I couldn't stand up straight. You know, and then that was an issue. Upper back work fixed it. And then even like I used to have some issues with my knees being really tight. And as I did like squats at a lighter weight and focused on like sometimes like when we did the first cycle through together when I started with you, where I would have a 2-second pause at the bottom of a squat. It was a 5-second eccentric with a 2-second pause. You're just sitting there. And I remember like coming out of that, not lifting heavy weight, but afterwards, like feeling like I had this really good stretch and my actually increased my flexibility a bit in my legs, where I felt more limber because you're getting that weighted stretch essentially. And then you're building muscle in ranges that I wasn't used to building muscle in. And then as I had that muscle strengthened up in the strength there, my body was less tight. So
what you got? You got anything for this you want to add?
And then
I'll add the end. Like anything, exercises, probably like I'm sure your wheelhouse is more strength training. So
yeah, so for me, when I think of this for preventing injuries, like first of all, you want to look at, okay, where are you compromised? Like what link is the weakest? Like we want to reinforce any of those weaknesses and bring them up to par. Have you had any injuries that we need to look at and consider? Is that throwing your mechanics off? Is it an issue like on your left side? Say you injured your left leg, so now your right leg is overdeveloped. But honestly, looking at balance and looking at full range of motion, that would be my thoughts on it, regardless of the exercise, the stretch, whatever. You want things to be as balanced as possible, from laterally and anterior posteriorly. Just because you're going to call on something one day and it's not going to be there on one side or something, whenever you're moving through something. So full range of motion and working to be balanced in those exercises.
Yeah, I think one of the areas, now you can't really prevent, I was going to say you can't prevent injuries. It's obviously you're trying to mitigate injuries, but like you guys both said, it, range of motion, trying to establish good range of motion, full range of motion as you can, good control under all that range of motion. So I like specifically joint training and doing some isometrics and ranges, I think can be very helpful. And then something that people don't do often, we do a lot of linear, we do pushes, pulls, lateral raises, all one plan. I think training rotational movements is very important for jiu-jitsu, just because a lot of the injuries are rotational injuries. If Kimura, those rotational heel hooks, things like that impact the knee or the ankle, rotational. So strengthening in a rotational plane. And that's some ways that I like to do. I like to do that in my programming, also with isometrics and range strengthening too. Strengthening at length, strengthening to length. Those are things that have kind of with my training, especially for jiu-jitsu athletes, we're a little bit we require some different needs. But again, like exactly what you guys said, full range of motion strengthening, and Eli, what you said, making sure that you don't have certain muscles or certain areas of the body that overpowering others and other ones that aren't working. And we do that in jiu-jitsu. We get a lot of that because we're doing a lot of these specific rounding kind of movements. So,
and that's something I wanted to add to this also. In jiu-jitsu, a lot of times the spine is in flexion, like you're rounded. So whenever you begin to switch gears and start lifting weights, be mindful of that spinal flexion. Normally in most all lifts, we either want a neutral spine or even a slight bit of extension in the spine. The only time when we're lifting that we want to have excessive flexion in the spine is if we're doing sit-ups, muscles that are going to contract the abdomen. So like when you're doing your squats, when you're doing your rows and all these things, a neutral spine, being mindful of that and not falling into a posture that's comfortable from jiu-jitsu.
Okay. Yep. True about that. Or you guys want to answer that one?
Let's do it.
All right. So I'll read it. What is your echo bike regimen preparing for a tournament? And also asking about duration intervals on the echo bike.
So for me, at least, for whatever reason, I feel like I get more benefit in most cases from steady state than I do from, because I'm already if you look at my heart rate, like on the mat, it's already all over the place. So I'm already getting those like sharp bursts, especially when I'm training for a competition. I'm pushing myself either during drilling, when I'm busting through takedowns for 2 minutes and my heart rate's up really high, or even during a hard roll. I'm already getting there sometimes. I feel like the steady state seems to help me the most because it's the area that I'm not in jiu-jitsu. I'm not sitting in a steady state. And this is like back in the day when I was getting ready for fighting, we would go get road work. We would just jog. You go get your miles in, at a steadier state, right? So I feel like I get a benefit from that, in making my cardiovascular system is essentially efficient, from that. And then I would do that a few times a week. And then, as long as I felt up to it, I would do a hard session where I'd be cranking, right? So it would be a hard, like I wouldn't even like this wouldn't even really be intervals. Sometimes it would be like on the bike and you would go as hard as you could for like 20 seconds. Your heart rate just
Yes.
and then I would rest. And then give yourself some time to recover and then back to like just pushing it. But like when you're on that bike for that 20 seconds, it's like as hard as you possibly can, like not kind of hard and saving some for the next round. Like, I mean, just trying to blow it out and then resting so that I can work for the top end at max, like basically like my ability to like basically rev my heart up as hard as it can go. And then but it's also, you have to be careful about that because that's why I said feeling, because as simple as that is, if I did 10 rounds of say like as hard as I could for 20 seconds with even like 1 to 2 minutes of rest, I'm spent. Like, I mean, like it's taxing neurologically more so than it is like muscularly. Right. So, but a lot of times for me, it's like, if I'm drilling, if I'm doing jiu-jitsu and then I'm adding a little steady state in there, I feel fine. I've never ran out of gas. I think for me, like a lot of times where I get the extra energy that I need is from the drilling and stuff in the gym. Now that said, if you don't have as much time to be in the gym, I think you could add the interval work in and that could be really useful. So if you're not in the gym every single day like me, then it's like, okay, get on the bike and you could set a timer for a number. Back in the day, we would set the timer for our match durations and we would do like 3 matches or something like that, you know, and then you go hard. You know, you could do a number of different protocols, but hard and for a number of seconds with a slow for a number of seconds. And you go back and forth to try to mimic the cadence of a jiu-jitsu match where you're going really hard for a couple seconds scrambling and then you're positioning yourself, you're going a little slower, then you go really hard again and then do that for however long your match is and then get a couple of those in. And those are some ideas, but again, everybody's a little different with it.
As far as like interval training that I'll have some clients do, honestly, like Tabata drills, you know, so you do 8 rounds of 20 seconds on, 40 seconds off, as far as a relaxed pace, 40 seconds. I would do it in like a wing gate style. So like if I'm on a spin bike, like I'll crank that tension up as high as I can stand it for that sprint. Like I want to be working like to the point that I'm wheezing almost. I want to be really, you know, everything I have, and then dial the tension back, pedal, you know, at a relaxed pace for, you know, the rest period. And then again, getting that speed up, cranking that tension up. And the same concept if you're on an echo bike. But I agree with you 100% on that. If, you know, you can add that in if you're not getting as many sessions in on the mat as a jiu-jitsu athlete. But that steady state is going to help a great deal too with being able to, you know, come back to baseline with your heart rate.
That's something for me that because I can only get to the gym 2-3 times a week. So we did some of that interval training. And for me, that was really the benefit of it is obviously physical, being able to really push yourself and then, you know, kind of recover and allow your body to get used to that, to recovering more efficiently. The other piece, Chewy, you talked about the mental aspect of pushing yourself and really trying to blow it out as hard as you can, having like to dig a little bit deeper and really kind of, it sucks. I listened to some music that I really didn't like just to make me mad a little bit. I would, I'm not going to tell you what I listened to, but I listen to Nickelback. I put Nickelback on and I get after it. I
get a bad rap. I mean, like it wasn't great music, but I mean, like it was like on the radio all the time. It was like, it was like super like catchy radio music.
Very catchy, but terrible.
Well, actually, I had a cousin he was paralyzed and he actually credited their music for helping him be able to walk again.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I don't know if you're serious.
No, yeah, I am. Like he was in a wheelchair, like, but a video of theirs and their music came on TV and he actually stood up and walked over, turned it off.
I was waiting for it.
There it is. But in all seriousness, that was the interval training for me was really helpful. It just kind of mentally it was physically beneficial because I could recover a lot faster, but also mentally.
Well, also you're getting your body used to being in those kind of zones, right? Yeah, so like sometimes in jiu-jitsu, again, if you're a more experienced person, and this is like something where, you know, back in the day when I was a black belt and I didn't have like a ton of highly skilled training partners, I used to do more cardio work because I just knew my body needed to be able to get to those places. You know, so if you're training all the time, you're super efficient and you're never getting to your max heart rate and experiencing that and letting your body experiencing that when you get out there in like the middle of a competition, which is what's going to happen. Like your body's not going to know what to do. And it's not used to it. And you'll zap out super quick. So those intervals are super nice, especially if you're not getting into those high ranges. And it's one thing, sometimes it's fun to give you, if you're getting ready for a competition, something I do, I wear a heart rate monitor sometimes during certain training sessions to see how fast I'm recovering. And then also to see like how high my heart rate's getting, and then measure that as I'm going through like periodically throughout the camp. So I can see like, okay, like I'm doing the same stuff I did on this day, but by now I'm feeling better. But then I also can link it up with, well, my heart rate's like significantly lower than what it was when I first started this. I'm getting better and more efficient. I'm in better shape. My body's adapting to this stuff better, that kind of thing.
I'll go with this one, Chewy. This next one.
Let's do it. What is the most preventable common injury you see and should be done to prevent it? I'm going to assume in jiu-jitsu, maybe you could talk about lifting. Okay. You could do one for lifting, because I mean, obviously you probably see stuff all the time as a gym owner, like see people coming in and lifting like crazy. You know, I'm trying to think of the most common injuries I see. Probably, you know, honestly, the most common one I see is and this is not at my gym, this is at other gyms, and this is something that like I changed at my gym because of it, is letting new white belts roll, like do live rolling. Like I don't mean like they can't do situational stuff, but letting them just do full rolls, like takedowns, whatever, even though they don't know how to do anything, you know. So like, you know, you might go into a class, okay, you learned how to do a scissor sweep and a something, right? Okay, well then now you go full roll, and now you have someone that's never trained before. They don't have any clue what they're doing, and then they roll and they injure themselves because they post wrong, or they have, you know, land on their shoulder. I remember like I had a hard and fast rule on that forever, and I remember I broke it one time.
I was there.
You were there for that guy.
Yeah.
So he'll tell you. So like I'm getting ready. We finished our situational training, which then for me, like with the new guys, I'm like, you're done now. I don't want you to get hurt. So let's just, you know, let's pause here because we need to be aggressively patient. This is going to take some time. You're not going to be a black belt one day. So I'll say, all right, you guys are done. That's it for you guys. If you guys want to continue to roll with each other over here, you could do some situational training. And he pleaded with me. He's like, just let me roll. Let me roll with the guys, whatever. And I'm like, all right, man. And he was rolling with a really, really skilled, very safe black belt. One of my guys, Mark. And I mean, Mark and I roll all the time. He will not hurt you at all. He will take care of you. He'll submit you, but he'll take care of you. And the dude just fell wrong, separated his shoulder, dislocated. I'm like, damn it. I was like, so back to now, it is a rule, and I'm not breaking it again. Like if you're new, do that. And I get a lot of messages from newer people who get injured really early in jiu-jitsu because they don't spend enough time doing things like situational training, where they can develop some comfort and some sort of understanding as to what they're doing from positions before they get thrown into like the full rolls. And so they get these injuries that are very preventable if they just had a little bit more time to acclimate. I don't necessarily agree with the methodology of, say, like the Gracie stuff where you don't roll until you're like a blue belt stripe or whatever. But I think that having some time in just situational training where we isolate each position, each area that we're working on, and then while you're working on it, that's all we're focused on. And then eventually we can combine all this stuff together, and then you go have some fun. So that's my piece. What's some lifting stuff? Maybe some shoulder shrugs. We're really rounding the shoulders.
People coming in, throwing 500 on the old squat rack.
I've seen some.
Have you had any like crazy injuries in your gym? Like someone doing dumb stuff?
Not in my gym. At gyms I've worked at. At my gym, I'm very thankful. Like the overall knowledge is you know, very, very good.
Well, also too, you're like at a gym where it is your gym, right? Like you and your business partner, but you're the guy in there. Like you said, you're the leader. And so you come in, and so it's going to be one of those things where you have watchful eyes there. And so if someone, you know, does something that would be against the culture that you've created, then they're going to be like, hey bro, like, come here, you know, like, don't do that.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And the members will do that too before I get a chance to.
Right. Exactly. But it's not like a gym where you go in, nobody ever gets to know anybody. There's no,
exactly, because
like I've been in gyms like that. Like it's funny. One of my mentors, there's a place in Louisville called Mid-City Mall. Mm-hmm. And so his name was Jim Kane. He was an old like lifter thing. And then he had a gym called Mid-City like Barbell, Mid-City Fitness. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I used to lift as a kid. When I was younger. And so he was like a mentor to me. And like, you know, you go into that gym, everybody knew him. He would talk to everybody. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you didn't see crazy stuff because everybody kind of like knew each other, and they would take care of someone. And if you were new and you never lifted before, they kind of like help you out a little bit. But then I remember going to like a regular gym where it's just, you know, Globo gym, and like nobody talks to anybody. you know, and like everybody just kind of goes into their little corners, and, you know, you'll see the gamut of people doing like really, really well done exercises to, you know, I remember there used to be a guy at the gym that I used to lift at. I used to call him the screamer, because he'd be over there, he'd load the weight up super heavy, and, you know, everything was partials. I never saw him do one full rep of anything. And obviously there's certain times that you can use partials, right?
Of course. Yeah.
But I mean, everything was a partial. He'd get on the hammer strength machine. And I remember one day, like, he's there and he's got so many damn barbells on there, you know, and he's like, just like just grunt and yelling. And everything was that, I'm like, what is this guy doing? You know, and where I wouldn't have seen that at his gym. But so anyway, I think that's maybe probably a big reason why you don't see it a lot at your gym, because you're there and your members are there.
Thank you so much for saying that. But yeah, you know, and again, it's a certain culture there where, like, you know, I've had the honor of working with a lot of people that are there, and, you know, a great deal of them, and they're all very much, you know, experienced lifters.
Yeah.
You know, if you had like a belt system for that, a lot of them would be upper belts, you know.
Yeah.
Like, they all have a very good understanding of the movements. And, you know, if somebody comes in new and they're not too sure, then so many people are willing to help. But as far as like common injuries that I've seen, a lot of times it comes from, one, not having good mechanics. So, like, you know, and that normally will be exposed under heavy weights. So somebody not, you know, being mindful of like pelvic tilt on a squat and getting stuck at the bottom with heavy weight, have posterior pelvic tilt, butt wink, and then their low backs hurt. And, you know, or their hips are jumping up on a deadlift and they stress a hamstring. But again, earlier, you know, like one of the real common things is, man, you'll see these guys and just their elbows will be hurting. And you can tell it's just, they don't understand like that joint stacking concept with arm training, and just kind of do that. But, you go in any gym and you can throw a rock and hit somebody with shoulder issues just from improper benching and so on. And a lot of that comes from not knowing how to set your back and leaving the shoulders compromised. Like,
well, getting back into this, like you're out here, opposed to like locking them in place.
Never,
ever,
already
in that position.
Yes, sir. Never protract the shoulders when you're on a bench press, especially if you're benching heavy. That's why bench shirts were designed, was to hold you in that posture. But then, you know, obviously you do that yourself through sitting up properly. You retract the scapula, you depress the scapula. It sets the head of that humerus real firmly in that joint, keeps it a little safer. But yeah, normally shoulder issues, man, it's pretty common.
Yeah, I feel like you know, jiu-jitsu obviously has its share of, you know, chronic, like, you know, sort of long-term injuries and stuff. But I feel like for jiu-jitsu, a lot of times has more sudden, oops, accident, freak thing happen, versus lifting, where they do happen. If it's really done like improperly, like that poor lady that was doing the back squat, and like why was she not in a power rack? Like, well, first of all, why was she lifting that weight necessarily? But like, why wasn't she just in a power rack to catch the weight?
Yes, the one that came out of the mono and it broke her neck. So the thing, if you look, the very first thing that was the issue there is they had that bar racked above a height that she could unrack flat-footed. So, like, you know, you got to think too, if you're squatting a ton of weight like that, that bar is going to settle into you. You know, your tissues on your, I mean, even if it's muscle and it's dense, it's going to give to a great deal of weight. So you're going to rack, when you rack, that bar is a little bit lower than whenever you unracked, because it's going to settle into you. It's like when you unrack a bunch of weight on a bench press, you're going to settle into the pad.
Right.
You know, so
because you have the added weight. It's like sinking into you.
Yeah. Like if you start benching a ton of weight, like I would actually dig into the bar and try to push myself into the pad as far as I could. Right. So that it didn't compromise my positioning.
Now she was just training though, wasn't she? Or she
it wasn't a competition. It didn't look like, I mean, I seen no judges. I seen no setup, no, you know, nothing.
Because I didn't really want to see it. Someone was telling me, I saw a clip. I was like, I'm good. But I was like, why didn't they have like straps or something to catch? Like,
yeah, they had no safeties. I think it was on a mono and they had no, so I have a mono at my gym. What it is, mono lift, it does one lift. It's for squats. And what it's designed for is you stand up out of it and the hooks swing out of the way so you can squat directly in place. You don't have to walk the squat out.
Which is important if you're lifting like heavier weight, where you're trying to
don't have to walk on it.
If you got like 1,000 pounds on your back and you're trying to walk, you know, that's going to be rough.
It's on one leg at a time.
Right.
But anyway, it looked like I can't remember if it was a mono for certain, but I'm thinking it was. But anyway, they had the hooks higher than she could unrack. So she had to tiptoe, which is dangerous as hell anyway. You know, she's not planted. You want it to where it's just below your lockout. So you can actually get in your squat pattern, squat path, and stand up with it. And then you're there, you're settled. So when she tiptoed and then the bar come out and sit down on her, her heels dropped, she broke posture, she fell. The guy spotting her obviously couldn't do anything with it. And it actually my understanding is it broke her neck and severed her spine.
Because that's like when
Wow.
I was talking to someone about it, like, because we're at the gym and, sometimes you'll see guys go, if you got it, like if you got like a power rack, put the damn bar in the power rack. I mean, you don't have to,
man.
but it's nice to have because you like the one time you don't do it and you need it, man, I wish I would have done that,
Mhm.
because like a lot of times I'll be in there, in the early morning by myself. I'm like, that bar is going in the middle because that's what it's there for, to catch me if I fall forward so that, or if I fall back or whatever happens, my knee slips, my knee tweaks, I can't get up. It catches opposed to, me like falling forward. And again, you can bail out of squats and stuff sometimes, but still, you just never know.
Yeah. And you got to know how to bail out too.
Yeah.
It's like, like the points you made, about people, not knowing how to, do takedowns or even how to fall correctly, break fall or anything. Same concept here. You have to know how to fail correctly. Like you always ditch a bar off your back and never forward, because if it rolls over your head, it's going to, cause a ton of flexion in your neck and just like a can opener,
right?
And you're going to pin your face to your chest and separate your cervical spine. So even like people, whenever I have somebody I'm working with, I'm like, I'll teach them how to ditch a bar, and get out from under it, because again, it's, if you feel compromised, you want to be able to get out. Like you're taking it, especially if you're lifting like heavy weight that could really risk injury, being able to get out safely is key.
So for me, as far as I would say the most I wouldn't say preventable.
Well, you get people that come to you for injuries.
Absolutely.
So you probably get like,
Man.
like is it his knees, shoulders, neck?
The most common, I think, per the research, the most common injured joint would be the knees.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's preventable. It kind of depends on the person. I think you need to make sure, I mean, a lot of it's knowledge of what your joints can do and where their limitations are. Like I said, some preventable stuff is making sure that you're prepared for training, warmed up properly. You do the rotational training. I think that's something that can be beneficial. I think Chewy, you made a great point about like with beginners, you're taking out a lot of these variables, you're putting them in a very constricted kind of positional training or very restrictive environments where they're less likely to plant incorrectly or move incorrectly. That's just kind of, a lot of it comes to like just building an understanding of what you're doing. So in jiu-jitsu, same thing, in weightlifting and getting under a squat or a bar, like knowing what's the proper positioning of the bar height. How do I load it? How do I put it on my back? How do I actually bail out? So a lot of those things a lot of it's education. I think and I don't know how the research kind of exactly explains this, but for you, for example, you've gotten injured a lot less as you've gotten older. You've gotten a little, obviously your skill has always been there, but you've gotten wiser about what your body can handle. A lot of beginners get injured, a lot more early on because they're making bad decisions or moving incorrectly. As we get older or like more experienced in jiu-jitsu, I think I've gotten less injured. I've got some chronic things, which we all kind of develop, which is part for the course.
Part of just getting old, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Something to kind of go back to the lifting analogy, or it's kind of comparing it to lifting, just like lifting lighter weight and trying to like get better at lifting opposed to just trying to move heavy weight. A lot of times people go into the gym and they get into these gym wars, right? And it's one of those things you have to remind yourself sometimes that it doesn't matter. Like practice doesn't count. Like what are you why are you training that day? Are you trying to get better with a particular movement, a particular position, or are you just trying to win because you want to feel good about yourself? It's like going to the gym. Are you trying to lift? Are you trying to hit a certain muscle group? Or are you just trying to pull up a certain amount of weight on a bench press because you want to feel good about yourself? One of the things that changed from my 30s, as I was getting older, was that like writing was on the wall. I couldn't train like an idiot all the time. And so I had to scrap the gym wars and be a little bit more intentional with my rolling and be more focused. And that made a big difference where you could roll less hard and still get a lot of skill progression from it. Even if you weren't even winning the rounds technically, because you're working on something specific. And so for a lot of people coming into it, don't worry about winning as much. Worry about like, am I getting better with the technique? Am I getting better with the position? That stuff's far more important. And it changes the focus on just trying to win in practice, because it just doesn't matter. And a lot of people get injured because they start going really, really hard all the time in the practice, in the gym, and then leads to injuries.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to touch on quick before we change subjects. So as far as like, working with lesser weight and so on, and like working on your form and so on, even you'll have sometimes people say, I want to use less weight and just get my form down. it has to be enough weight to make you use correct form.
Sure.
It's like when you're drilling and somebody gives
That's a
you
great
just
point.
enough resistance to make you do the technique correctly.
That's a great point.
It has to be enough weight to make you feel when you get out of that groove. Like it has to be enough to make you pay for it a little bit. Not so much that if you get outside of that, you're going to get injured. But it has to be enough to give you that instant feedback, like, oh, that didn't feel right. That wasn't good.
Right.
Because otherwise, you know, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Sure.
And if you get used to lifting sloppy, even with lightweight, and you continue to go on, then that's just going to continue to get further and further.
I mean, that's like, I remember CrossFit, like they used to give us the PVC pipes. And it's always so stupid. Like, I was like, this doesn't make any sense because this, like, I don't feel this at all. This is not what it's going to be like.
Yeah. And you know, that's the thing is like, you have to have enough on there to give you that feedback so that you feel whenever you are doing it correctly or not. Otherwise you get no feedback, and you can do it in any way without any kind of, you know, penalty. And what you had said there about the knees, and feel free to touch on this too, or tell me if you disagree. But a lot of times when I've seen issues with the knees, that's the part that showed up. It was actually a downstream problem sometimes because somebody would have weak hips and they're like, man, my knees hurt on squats. And it would be because their abductors were so weak that their knees were caving in on that squat. You know, so a lot of times maybe that's not the issue. Maybe that's just what showed up as a result of an issue upstream. And that's just where you were having the issue, and it brought that to your attention. But sometimes mechanically, you know, and again, you'll expose that whenever it's a great deal of weight or you're under a lot of, you know, fatigue. Because like with lifting, we're dealing with margins, and that margin is the distance between your load and your limit. And that would be your margin for error. You know, like if I've got a very, you know, lower weight on the bar, and I've got a very high max on that lift, well, then I've got a large margin for error. Whenever I get above, you know, like 90%, 95%, well, that margin for error becomes non-existent. And if I get out of that, then, or even if one muscle in that chain can't stand that, then again, like say my abductors are weak, my knees are going to cave in, you know, I'm going to lose. You're
getting some bad habits there. And you can kind of get away with a lot of incorrect things because it's not enough weight or stimulus to make you correct it. I think it can be a strength issue. Obviously it can be a mobility issue up the chain or down the chain. You got to look at the hip mobility, of course, being able to get your hips in the right position. And then the other thing is ankle mobility. On a squat, ankles have enough dorsiflexion, being able to really drive. And you know, so many therapists, like physical therapists, are, oh, the knee should never go over the toes. That's the silliest thing. That's the way that
was the way back in the day. That was like the literature.
Silliness. Like you have to, like for you to be able to do a full depth squat, the knees they need to track in line with the feet, but they need to go past the toes.
I mean, that's how your body's designed.
Especially
when you look at lever length. Like if you have somebody squatting and they're trying to squat for depth in a competition, if they have long legs, unless they just squat extremely wide, you know, to keep a vertical spine, their knees are going to have to go past their toes.
100%.
And if they don't have the ankle mobility, well, then we have to, you know, essentially borrow from Peter to pay Paul. We put them in lifters, like elevate their heel. And then we increase that ankle mobility. We borrow, you know, but absolutely. Cause if you're squatting and you're trying to squat to depth and your heels are getting light, you're going to put a lot of shearing force on your patella tendon, on your quad tendon.
I mean, a lot of problems happen, and you're already loading that tissue, and you have to kind of, like you said, you have to be able to stack, and you're stacking. You know, you're stacking the joints, right? The knees are kind of in line, the hips are, everything's kind of stacked properly, like, especially with the spine, right? We're getting our shoulder blade muscles retracted and getting everything stacked, make a nice shelf for that weight, and then we're, you know, make sure our back is in the proper position. To be able to elicit, you know, a good squat and good strength. So, we got a couple more. You want to do a couple more?
Let's do a couple more. I'm getting my.
You're good. You're good.
My dinner ordered.
Eli, this will be a good question for you, man. This is specifically, I think, a strength training question. I'll read it here. It says, different body areas every workout, or long-term, few weeks on one area at a time, and also maybe how to break through plateaus. So, how do you like to? That's a kind of a mixed bag of stuff. There's a lot.
We can
You're a mixed bag of stuff.
I am a mixed bag of stuff.
Look at you. It's good.
You gotta say that. All right, let's do it.
So Yeah, everybody remembers that infomercial from years ago, the P90X, the muscle confusion.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
my
I did
God,
that.
right.
I remember
Yeah.
doing that in my basement.
Yeah, absolutely. It fixed everything. You know, it cures
Yeah.
common cold, removes stubborn grass stains, makes childbirth pleasure. It fixed everything. And but with that being said, like it caused a lot of people to think they had to do something different every time they went to the gym.
Yeah.
And taking that buffet style approach, like I'll have a little of this and a little of this, and then tomorrow I'll do a little of this, a little of that, and you don't do the same exercises, you know, at least, you know, within the same program weekly, then it's very hard to get any sort of linear growth. Like I explain to people like this, like, you know, everybody had that video game they played as a kid, and you had the one racetrack on there that you were really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you think you were really good at that one racetrack? Probably because you played it most.
Mm-hmm.
You got really good at it. You understood it really well.
You liked it, so you played it.
There it is.
Yeah.
So with that being said, you pick something, you do it on that day or that particular workout, and you look for growth inside of that. If I go from squatting, you know, 2 plates to squatting 5 plates, I know for a fact that I've built tissue in those muscles that control that weight. And I do that by doing it the same way. So what I like to do is I'll lay a program out, and it could be 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, depending on the athlete. But I'll make sure that it's structured in a way that we're looking for linear growth inside of those. Now, again, that will change depending if they're a power lifter. We work on percentages, and we will begin to taper the volume and increase intensity as they get closer to the event. And then with, you know, strength training or jiu-jitsu training and so on, training for jiu-jitsu, it's just a matter of looking for growth inside of those movements.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
getting
like
comfortable with those movements.
Well, that's the thing. Like, again, I've done like the CrossFit stuff, which was, you know, like, which was what? You can't keep your shit together.
Yep.
But you would be doing like these workouts that were all just like mixed up or whatever. And
there's nothing going
on. There's something on the
notes.
notes.
All right.
We in 3rd grade science.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
we're good.
show you in a second.
All right, what are we doing here? Who are we talking about?
You
Mobility?
had mentioned rehab for somebody with a sprained suspensory tendon.
Yes. Tug on a little less, I guess. That's the way to let that heal up a little bit.
Bad angle.
Let's do another question.
Naps.
Let's do another question.
That's it.
All right.
There it is.
I'll take this one. I'll take this question for you fellas. When are you doing mobility before, after workout, and what does that look like? Chewy, actually, you've implemented some mobility work. You tell us about that.
I like it. I like it after. I mean, for me, I like stuff after training. I might do a little bit before, like, you know, we'll do some different like hip movements and stuff like that to get some hip
dynamic stuff.
There's some dynamic stuff before training, right? And then after training, I'll do like longer holds of stuff. Typically, I'll either do it after training when I'm warm, or in the morning or evening when I'm warm after a hot shower. Because I like when my muscles are nice and loose, I'll stretch and like loosen things up a little bit. But if it's just like, you know, we might do some hip movements and some dynamic stuff to like get the body rotating a little bit, get the back to move a little bit before training, and then longer holds afterwards when I'm warm and we're done with, you know, and I'll do this with lifting or jiu-jitsu. Like after it's over, then I might engage in like the longer holds of stuff. Yeah. Unless there's a specific area that's really tight. So like if like for instance, my ankles tend to be kind of tend to be kind of tight. So before a squat day, I'll do some ankle like stretches and I'll hold them a little bit longer because I just need to have, because it gives me a little extra that I need. That's sort of specific to me. So
I agree. So I do like joint cars to make it's like those are kind of joint circles. So control articular rotations. I do that like as a daily practice. Like I'll do that, but if I'm at the gym or I'm working on something specific, I'll spend more time there on that area. So you don't have to do every single joint in the body, but maybe like, you know, you're going to be doing jiu-jitsu and, you know, your hips and your knees and maybe your shoulders get a little tighter and you need some work there. So I'll do those joint circles, nice controlled, some, you know, shorter hold times beforehand. And then after training, you do some longer kind of cool down holds if you need to for stretching. Is there anything you like to do? Because you got some limitations in your shoulders.
Yeah. So from a lifting standpoint, my stretching beforehand is to make sure that I can mechanically do the movement mechanically correct.
Mhm.
You know, so if I'm tight, like before squats, I might do joint gapping on my knees. I'll do the cars like you
There
do.
you go, joint gap.
And I'll do some of these things to help me get the range of motion that I need. But after the workout, the muscle's full of blood, and it's a lot easier to stretch, and I get a lot more, you know, I can get a lot more effectiveness out of that stretch once they're full of blood. Like, not to mention too, if I'm moving from one muscle group to the next, like say I'm doing back after chest, well, I have to open my back to get my elbows back for the rows or back movements.
Sure.
So if my chest is still really tight, I can't get my elbows past that center line.
So loosen up the chest so you can get better back.
Exactly right. Yep. And I may even, like say if I'm a little sore before, like my back day, so my chest is a little tight, maybe I stretch my chest beforehand to help again get those elbows back to you know, to be able to flex those posterior muscles even better.
Yeah, that's something I picked up from you when we did a back day, was stretching my pecs out before I did my rows so that I could get more engagement out of my back, because I can go a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and being able to open and like, you know, we talked about earlier, getting that full range of motion, really being able to stretch those muscles out too. And it helps the recovery of that chest if it's sore.
Not sure what that one is. Ferguson versus Dennis.
What's that?
GFL. Oh,
Dylan
that's the Global Fight League.
Oh, I don't
It's
know.
that new one. Yeah.
They're
I guess
putting a bunch
Tony
of over the
Ferguson.
hill people. Have you heard about this?
No, you know what I wish they would do is I wish they would start like a masters division for fighting.
It's kind of what this is essentially.
But
man.
like,
all these guys are
They're not wording it that way, but it
former
kinda
UFC
is, yeah.
people.
But then like don't make them do like maybe 2 rounds of like 3 minutes or something. You know, like, because it's like if you're old, you don't need to be in there fighting like 5 minutes, right? Like just put them in for like a 2-3 minute, like 2-3 minute rounds and be done with it, right? And like be like a thing. I think it would be
That'd be cool. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like there was all kinds of like old UFC fighters that, you know, needed some money, who, you know, didn't need to be in there fighting hardcore, but you know, you put them in there like for a couple minutes. You could even tweak the rules a little bit. You know, like in jiu-jitsu, they don't even let like some of the old guys do certain moves. Just like say, all right, like, you know, if you're in the masters division of the UFC, we'll take away like, you know, certain movements to the head or whatever to try to like, maybe you can't elbow in the head on the ground or something. I don't know, you know, something to try to
keep people safer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's kind of that I would consider that like those GFL or the Global Fight League, I think is what it's called. It's like these teams. I would consider that's like the, you know, the senior league, like the masters division and jiu-jitsu tournaments. That's probably, those guys are all similar. But here's the thing too, they're probably juiced up.
Let them juice the brains.
What do you don't think the masters division of a jiu-jitsu tournament?
Well,
not like
they're juiced up
with it.
You got a 55-year-old Brazilian with 12-pack abs coming out.
Oh, bro. I mean, you go to the tournaments and stuff, and it's just like, I mean, like, it's like all these guys. I mean, because TRT is so I mean, and again, to me,
I
like,
gotta get on that, man.
Well, no, I mean, but being serious, it's like, it's one of these things where if you can take something that would make you feel better, help you recover and improve your overall quality of life, and if done under the right guidance, it doesn't really pose too many health risks to you.
Yes, sir.
What the fuck when you do it? Right? It's like, you know, they go, well, it's not natural. Yeah, you know what? Like, there's a lot of things that's not natural. We got fluorescent light blasting us in the face. We're talking through a damn screen. This stuff wasn't around thousands of years ago. We sleep on beds made of weird foam that cushions us, right? Like, it's like, you know, if we find better ways of doing things. And so, you know, if you get these older guys that are training and they're, you know, wanting to be competitive, and they're like, you know, I go to this clinic, I get my blood work drawn and everything else, and, you know, it can tell me if I'm then why not? Go ahead. So I mean, the Masters division is full of it. Yeah, you know, and they don't even test the Masters divisions.
Yeah, bring back TRTV Tour.
Oh man,
bring back TRTV Tour.
Yeah,
dude, he was like, you could tell sometimes when he was like blasting, like on some cycle. There was one match. There was a fight. There was a fight where he had with Marvin Eastman.
Yep.
And
he split him.
Yeah, he got hit with
his head.
If you go back and look at him, that form that he was, I was like, oh my god, because he came out of his lat, like he looked like he was about to fly away. Right?
He had aesthetics too. Like he actually looked good.
He looked great.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, he looked amazing. And then, you know, TRTV Tour was like, you know, was like the perfect sort of blend of it. Like, he wasn't too, because there was a times where he'd get too big. You know, he'd get gassed out. It was like he was big enough, and he still had that, like, he had that ability to just, like, I mean, he was one of those guys, like, with his striking and everything else, like, he could just blast you at any point.
Oh yeah.
And you wouldn't know.
He only needed one round. Only needed one. All right. Let's do this one from Dennis.
All right.
Dennis the Menace. Dennis, what's up, man? How would you go about balancing multiple coaches, strength, nutrition, BJJ, mobility, PT, etc., if the recommendations start to conflict?
Here's a question if you're still with us, Dennis. Maybe you have multiple coaches and maybe this is a problem. How are these different coaches conflicting with one another? That would be an interesting thing to think about. Like, do you have a jiu-jitsu coach like who's trying to tell you how to eat or trying to whatever, or do you have your mobility coach is telling you not to do this? I think maybe a good sort of rule of thumb is just, make sure that everybody's staying in their lane. Like
I feel like what he's asking is actually at this table. Like there's so many guys that have all three of us as their coaches for these very things. And you know what I'm saying? Like literally, like that's what we all do for a great number of people. And we all work together with this. And,
I think communication is super important.
Yes,
I think you have to, if you feel like there's something conflicting, you need to, you could even have your coaches, we've worked with people together.
Yes.
Somebody that I've worked kind of more with recovery or like an injury rehab. And I'm like, and they're working with you as well. And I'm like, hey, these are some things I'm looking out for, just trying to be mindful of because they're recovering. And you're like, yeah, cool. I've got it. I can adjust. I know how to work around that. So I think some of the things, the ego comes into play for a lot of coaches. They feel like their thing is the most important thing, and it's not. It's a piece of it. And I think everybody's got to be able to work. You got to be able to communicate with each other first of all, and because your jiu-jitsu coach may say, well, you better get after, man. You got to be training really hard. You got this tournament coming up, and your PT may be like, well, I don't know, should you be competing? Is this the best idea for you? Think longevity, but you got this big tournament. There's so many different factors that come into it. But I think you have to have your coaches start to communicate if you feel like it's a problem.
Yeah, I think if you just, because he said he doesn't have multiple coaches working, so this is not a problem right now. But I think if as long as everybody's staying in their lane, right? So like if I go to my jiu-jitsu coach, I want my jiu-jitsu coach to give me jiu-jitsu. And maybe you talk to them as a friend or whatever, that's fine. But you're coming to him for that. If you're coming to your lifting coach, your diet coach, then like you come to him for that. Like when I go to Eli, I work with Eli as my coach for my diet and my lifting, right? If something's off, or if I want to adjust something, I come to him and say, hey man, I'm not feeling this. Like for instance, there was one point when we were bulking and I was like, hey man, I'm having trouble with this food. Because I was eating so much food and then it was interfering with my ability to train. And he was like, here, well, let's make this adjustment. Instead of saying, well, no, you just have to do it. Like, no, let's make an adjustment because we need to make sure that this thing is in place. And then years ago, I remember I had like a normal lifting routine, and I had my jiu-jitsu coach who had gotten a hold of some stupid lifting program that was for jiu-jitsu, and Mike, and so we were doing these like asinine lifts out on the floor of the gym, and I ended up getting really bad tendonitis. And so again, I'm not saying that a jiu-jitsu coach couldn't be your lifting coach. I'm just saying that if you're going to a particular coach for a thing, they should just know their lane. And if they start to cross over there, you just have to be able to draw a boundary and to say like, hey, listen, like if you had multiple coaches, I'm going to go to this person for this. And they know their thing. And, most people I think won't have a problem with that. I don't think most people who have like multiple coaches would have any issues. Like, oh, you have a PT doing your recovery for you. Good, go do it. Or you have a person who knows nutrition, they're guiding you through. Perfect. Let's do your thing, man. So like, I think I was talking to one guy about diet, and then he was like, oh, I'm working with Eli now. Oh, great. You're working with Eli. Then I don't have to say anything.
Sure.
I'm just going to tell you what he says anyway, but like go work with him. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal for most people, as long as you have good coaches. And if they start to get weird, you can just draw a boundary and say like, no.
Yeah, it's similar to like having multiple like doctors. Like you have a cardiologist think this is the most important thing, and this is causing everything. And you have your, endocrinologist or whoever, and they think their stuff is. So you just everybody's going to see things through a certain lens.
It's like having multiple wives, where they just.
Are you speaking from experience? Because I don't know what that's like. You multiple? No,
I mean,
no. I don't have the.
It's too much energy.
I was gonna say I don't have the stomach for that, dude.
No.
One's enough.
What are you smiling about?
Man, Liz, it's y'all. What y'all talking about? It's you.
No, you get a little more country in your accent.
Yeah, well, you talking about things. Back to the cold cranking apps.
Oh my god,
it's with a Z.
Eli, diet question. Let's do diet question real quick.
Let's do it.
Do you want to answer this one right there?
I'll answer whatever. I don't.
No, you're not. You're still back in your own Back in the holler.
Back in the holler, yeah. I'm
Is that where
still
you're
on
at?
VFE.
You still come here. You just got more fuel efficient vehicle now. You come
Yeah.
up a little more.
Oh, by the way,
that's right.
Dennis the Menace asked Eli, did you move closer to Derby City MMA, or are you still
that's what he just
traveling?
pulled up to.
No, he's still coming from far out.
Yeah, that's right.
He's still
Figure that
dedicated.
out.
It's important to me, so I make time for it and I make it happen.
Yeah. All right. What about this one, Eli? Your diet be contributing factor to recurring athlete's foot breakouts. So is that something? That's a fungal thing, isn't it? That seems like could be
yeah.
fungal.
I
don't know if
if normally any allergic reaction or anything from your diet is going to be more systemic, in that it's not going to be, like just harbored in one area. So if you ate something that you're allergic to, then it would be like a more overall breakout. But like if it's just athlete's foot, maybe. I mean, it would affect your immune system.
Yeah.
So
that's
it would affect your immune system. So if your diet and supplementation aren't in place to make your immune system as efficient as possible, it might be harder to get over it. But that sounds like a situational thing.
Basically, you've never seen anybody had like athlete's foot because they were eating yogurt.
No. Okay. No, I've not seen that.
For this one, real quick, do I travel with Chewy to the opens? Some of the tournaments I do. I'll be going to Sandusky, I think.
Oh, you're going to Sandusky?
Yeah, I'm going to Sandusky. Got some friends out there, so I'm going to go make a weekend out of it.
The Sandusky one's
referee.
Dude, the Sandusky one's really cool because if you guys go to the Jiu-Jitsu Open in Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, you get a pass to Cedar Point.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure,
dude.
I don't know. Let me double check with Jeff. But I'm pretty sure that if you go and sign up for the Jiu-Jitsu Open, you get a pass.
Oh, that's cool.
To Sandusky. So it's like,
I have some friends out there. Cedar Point's awesome if you've ever been out there.
Is that like the one that has all the roller coasters?
Oh man, it's incredible. Yeah. I probably was like 10 years ago last time I went, but I got a buddy.
Did you ride Millennium Force?
Yes,
that was a good one.
I ran them.
It's like
Top Thrill Dragster's the other one, but that one they made a different one now. But that one was freaking scary. It just went straight up and then straight down.
Yeah,
that was awesome. But if you're a roller coaster person, you can make a weekend out of it. I did the Louisville tournament. That was the biggest one to date so far. Yeah. So
that was a great turnout.
It was awesome. Yeah. You were there.
Our Chicago one's coming up in March the 29th, and it's already bigger than what it was last year. So that's good.
Awesome.
So hopefully it continues to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what other ones I'll be making it to, but I enjoy them. If you enjoy competing and you want multiple matches and to run really well, our buddy Jeff, who's also a black belt, he's good. Him and Eric are phenomenal what they do.
Yeah, they run a really awesome. Well run tournament. I'm not saying we don't have like problems and stuff that happen, because everything does.
Sure.
But for the most part, we were talking about this the other day, like when you go to an IBJJF competition, one of the selling points of it used to be, it's not such a big deal now, but one of the big points back in the day was that it was ran on time. Like that seems like such a small thing, but the jiu-jitsu tournaments, I came from wrestling, and wrestling tournaments were run really efficiently. You knew when you were going to go, whatever. The only difference with wrestling was when you went to a wrestling tournament, there was one varsity division, and then they just had the different weight classes. And so you could it's a little bit easier than having, we've got so many different age, belt levels, and all these different divisions to run through in a jiu-jitsu tournament. But you'd go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, and I remember I competed at the Arnold Classic in 2004. And my first match of my division was around like 5:30. And then my first open weight match was at midnight. I was like, geez, it's so late, and then all the promoters, right? Like I think it was like Helson and those guys are, all right, guys, be back here tomorrow at like, it was like, be here early. I forgot what time that was, like 9:30, 10. We get there and nobody's there to open up the room for us, because they had different areas. Our particular room was sort of closed off from everything else. Wow. It was in this little convention center hall. And so nobody was there. So you just have a bunch of grapplers sitting around waiting, and then they eventually show up. And so you would see that. So the IBJJF used to be like the thing, because it was like ran on time. You knew when you were going to go, that whole thing. Well, it's one of the things with the Jiu-Jitsu Opens. Like you'll have a good idea of when you're going. It's run efficiently. It's not going to be like one of those things where, hey, we're going to move you around on 6 different mats all day long. It's in the system. You'll be able to kind of keep track of what's going on. And I think for me as a competitor, it's one of the things I like, is going to a competition and knowing when you're going, and having some idea of when you need to get ready and all that stuff, opposed to where I've seen this from a lot of people where they go to tournaments and they get warmed up and then their match doesn't happen, that kind of thing. So
Well, and they use a smooth comp, right? Which gives you basically it updates everything as you go, so you can check your phone, update it. So it's just everybody's using, they should be using some of these technologies that help people, adjust. So you'll know exactly when you need to be there. You won't have to hang out all day if you don't want to. But it's run really well. Chewy, you want to do?
Let's giveaways.
We'll do a couple giveaways real quick. I don't know if we have any more questions. If you got any, maybe we'll do one more.
Let's see. We'll give Mr. Dennis the Menace. We'll give him something. So we'll figure out what we're going to give you later, but we'll get you guys a citizen. So Dennis the Menace, send us an email to the Jiu-Jitsu Open the podcast email.
Okay, I'll share it there.
Okay. You missed the T.
I'll get it. This thing doesn't. Go ahead and chew. What else? Anybody else you want to?
Yes, we'll give one old Dennis, and then. Let's see who else we have here. And again, if you have another question, you can throw in. We'll give one to. We answered Logan Earls.
Yep. So Logan Earl, hook it up,
and then we got
Mixed Perfection.
Mixed Perfection. They're a repeat, so we'll give Mixed Perfection and Yo Jumbotron. I think that'll be good.
Yep. So it's the Jiu-Jitsu podcast @gmail.com. You send us a message through there. And then we're doing some kind of online thing.
I will give away a couple things.
Okay. So what do we want to request? An address from a physical address?
Yeah. We'll just send us a message, and with the message, just send your email address, and your mailing address too, just in case. And we'll just sort of like figure out what we want to give you. It could be everything from a free course to a book to a t-shirt. We'll send you something. So just send us an email with your info, and we'll get you something back. And since it's going to Eugene, it'll make sure that's actually done versus sometimes they send it to me, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, let's do Chewy. Let's thank our since we didn't get to it at the beginning. Let's thank our.
All right, let's thank our sponsors
for hooking it up. Grapple Science.
Grapple Science. You can check them out at grapplescience.com. They've got a great product called Cognition, which is a supplement to help give you a boost of energy without giving you the jitters of stimulants. So if you're a person who doesn't really respond well to stimulants, it can be a great supplement to give you a little bit more focus for your training. It does work pretty well. I've used it. So again, if you want to try it out, go to their website, grapplescience.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 at checkout to save 20%. Charlotte's Web, longtime sponsor, longtime user of their products. They make everything from CBD supplements, CBN supplements. They also use a lot of different supplements now with functional mushrooms like reishi, shiitake, things like that to have different effects. If you want to check out any of their supplements and save 30% off, go to charlottesweb.com, and the promo code is Jiu-Jitsu30 for 30% off the order. Also, guys, I was talking about this story at the beginning and our audio was screwed up. So we're going to, I'm going to be releasing some new rash guards coming up in about a week or two towards the end of March. And part of the reason, the big hang up, was the fact that I went to the IBJJF competition, which is like the HOA of jiu-jitsu competitions, right? All the little rules. For you guys that actually heard, if you're listening to this later on, then you're already hearing this again. But for you guys that were in the live feed, you did not hear this because of the audio feed. So I get to the competition. I'm at the Nogi Worlds in 2024. I have my rash guard on. I go out, and as I'm walking onto the mat, the ref stops me and says, "Hey, you can't wear that rash guard." I was like, "Why can't I wear the rash guard?" She's like, "Because it has gray on it. You can only have black and white." What? It's like light black. She's like, "No, it's gray." I'm like, okay. So I went and changed, put on my rash guard, which had like all the belt colors, like white, blue, purple, brown, black on it, but somehow that was fine. And go out there and compete, and it's fine. So I wanted to make sure there was an IBJJF black belt legal one there, because the rest of them are 100% IBJJF legal if you want to wear them for that purpose. And so we'll have actually 6 different designs coming out in the next couple of weeks. And so if you guys want to check it out, you'll hear stuff about it. But I'm getting it made through Epic Roll. And if you guys want to check out any of their stuff at any point, they do great stuff. I like all their gear and shirts and everything they make. It's at epicrollbjj.com. And the promo code for it is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can become a patron by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. For some of you guys that were asking about like mobility routines and stretching routines, when you become a member, Eugene has a series that he did for me and for my Jiu-Jitsu camp people that came in a couple of years ago, where he took them through these different movements to support us before we were getting ready to train. And, again, we're there for those 3-day camps. They're tough. And so we were doing those to kind of keep people loose. And so if you guys want to check out that routine, plus a bunch of other perks, you can go become a member of the Patreon. You get all that access to that stuff. And again, it's only about 20 minutes worth of stuff. So you could either do it 20 minutes, or you could even just shorten down and do chunks of it that you want to. By the way, guys, this is sort of off topic. If you guys want to join in May, June, and August, I'm having my annual summer camps here. Summer camps sounds like I'm coming in. Hey kids, come but we're having the jiu-jitsu camps here this summer, and the first one in May is on guard retention and side control escapes. June is on my old man guard passing style. August is half guard sweeps. If you're interested in coming to those, just go to my website somewhere, keep an eye on it. I've registration's about halfway full. We're actually about 60% full, and so we've got a few spots open at the camps, each one. But if you're interested, just get in touch with me or check out my website. You'll find some details about it. Also, if you want to join, and that'd be another way you can find out, go to my website at jujitsu.net/join, and you can join up and get my daily email. When you get my daily email, it could be everything from specific training ideas on jiu-jitsu, some of the stuff that I've learned with lifting and everything else. And then also too, I share books that I'm reading and just anything that I think might be useful to you on and off the mat. And then on top of that, when you sign up, you'll get a free book that's called Focus Jiu-Jitsu. It's a free ebook, and it comes with a video where I go through the whole book in case you don't want to read it. And again, giving you some ideas on training tips to get more focused training. As I was talking about earlier, it's really important that you train with a certain level of focus when you're doing jiu-jitsu, opposed to just coming in and just going really hard and not really sure what you're doing. You can get a lot of jiu-jitsu. You can get a lot out of jiu-jitsu with a lot less injuries, or even sometimes less expenditure of energy if you get really focused on what you're doing. And so the book will give you about 12 different strategies on how to do that. If you want to check it out, go to the website, jujitsu.net/join. And then again, you get the ebook. You can unsubscribe at any time. Otherwise, you can enjoy the emails that you'll get from that point on.
And I want to say, Eli, if people want to work with you or get a hold of you, how can they do that to get some coaching on strength and nutrition?
Yeah, so you can reach me with my email, elicoffeycoaching@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram also at @elicoffey_.
And I'll have all that in the show notes. So if people want to just find that, it'll be in the show notes for Eli. Man, I appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, for any of you guys like watching or listening in the future, hey, listen, in all seriousness, if you guys there's so many people, and it always happens, right? Like, if any of you guys are interested in like figuring out like how to eat to support your performance, to lose weight, gain weight, if you want a lifting routine to go with it. But I think the food for most people is the big one. It's the big rub.
Absolutely.
A lot of people have no idea why they're eating stuff, how to eat, to do certain things. I would encourage you to work with Eli. It's not cheap. But even if you don't work with him forever, it can be an education in the short term where you will then understand and take sort of the mystery out of food. It literally goes to, do I want to gain weight or lose weight? Because basically you just can adjust it, and you can do either or. For me, it was a really eye-opening experience, both to lose weight and do so in a really like thoughtful manner, to where I'm not just starving myself and I'm exhausted all the time, where I feel pretty energetic, able to train hard, feel good. And then being able to gain weight where I'm not just spilling over and getting fat. I'm like gaining muscle, and I'm not just getting, chunky in the process, right? Maintaining my body fat pretty much the same as I would be like during like sort of a maintenance phase. And so again, it's been a really useful education. So I encourage people to work with them if food is something you struggle with, whether you can't gain the weight, whether you can't lose the weight, or if you just want to see like what happens if you get like really dialed in with your food. How do you feel? Because it can be a game-changing, life-altering experience. And so I share that with you guys. So if you guys want to talk to Eli, get with him. If you don't want to work with Eli, then I encourage you to get another coach.
Absolutely.
I think it was Dennis that's in this chat. I mentioned it on another thing. It's like we pay people to go to teach us how to, fly a plane, or if we're going to be a pilot, or if we need someone to fix our pipes in our house, we call a plumber. We go to jiu-jitsu to teach me how to grapple with people. But then when it comes to like dieting with food, it's like, I know how to eat. I know how to do it, but then it's like, well, why don't you look the way you want to look? Just as simple as that. Yeah. And so it's a useful thing to work with someone who has that knowledge, opposed to you fumbling around, right? And it's worth its price, and it's worth the time that you spend doing it. So anyways, I encourage you guys to check them out. And Eli, it's always fun to have you on, bro. Always fun to chat with you.
Thanks, dude.
Appreciate you.
Cold cranking amps, fellas. Let's do it. That's the name of the game. Cold cranking amps. Talk to you guys next time.